Chapter 806. In the hibiscus garden, the warm sunlight shone on the square in front of a palace. Jing Emperor was basking in the sun while rocking his chair comfortably. He smiled as he looked at the children who were playing and running in front of him. It was not until he was tired that he yawned and asked, "How's the matter at the academy?" Standing in the sun like a pole, motionless for half an hour, the figure finally moved and said, "Although His Highness is busy with government affairs every day, he has never neglected the matter of the academy. Now the academy in the capital has already started construction. The 5 states near the capital have also begun the construction of their respective academies. However, His Highness seems to have encountered trouble in another matter." Changde said a few words, and Jing Emperor frowned slightly. "The Yu family." Changde nodded and said, "I am afraid that the Chui family is behind the Yu family. After all, if the academy is really implemented, in the long run, it will shake the foundation of the aristocratic families. The imperial court's paper shops are distributed to various yamens. They can't take out too much to give to the academy. The Yu family is indeed a problem." Jing Emperor thought for a moment and asked, "How did Emingzu deal with it?" "His Highness sends people to discuss with the Yu family every day. It seems that they have just reached an agreement, but the price is a bit too high." Jing Emperor looked puzzled and murmured, "This is not like Mingzhu's style of doing things, and it is not like that boy. What is Li Yi doing recently? His wife is about to give birth. These days, he has been attending to her. What a good-for-nothing guy." Jing Emperor waved his hand and said, "The scenery in the hibiscus garden is pleasant, and the weather is good today. Go and call the 3 of them over. I haven't seen them for a long time." The arrogant Lolita, who was approaching from behind, immediately gave up the idea of scaring her father. She hurriedly ran over and asked, "Father, is teacher coming over?" Jing Emperor nodded and said, "Father is busy today. Shaning just said that she wants to go out to play. Just bring more guards. Remember not to make trouble." "When did she say that she wanted to go out?" After getting a positive answer, the arrogant Lolita said in a sweet voice and immediately ran back. Emperor Jing asked in confusion, "Where are you going?" I didn't even wash up this morning, so of course I have to dress up and change my clothes." By the time her voice could be heard, she had already disappeared into the back of the hall. "When did this child become so vain?" Emperor Jing said doubtfully. He waved his hand and said, "Ask the catering company to prepare today's banquet." Just as Li Yi was about to leave, a eunuch came to his door and said that His Majesty had summoned him to Furong Garden. After a few steps, he stopped and stared blankly in front of him. Not far away from the intersection, a proud Lolita wearing a white palace dress stood there charmingly. Li Yi was slightly surprised. The proud Lolita usually liked to wear brightly colored clothes and wore her hair in a double spiral bun. The flying fairy bun was the favorite hairstyle of young girls. Today, she wore a white palace dress and her hair was combed back into a heart bun. At first glance, she didn't look like a crazy girl at all. At this moment, Li Yi truly felt that the 14-year-old Princess Shaning was no longer the proud Lolita from before. "Sir." She stood there with her hands clasped together and said something in a low voice. Li Yi came back to his senses and walked over. He asked, "Where's Yongning? Why isn't she with you?" She lowered her head and said with a red face, "Yongning has to go to class today. I'm not feeling well, so I asked for leave." "You're not feeling well?" Li Yi looked down at her and asked with concern, "What's wrong? Have you seen the imperial physician?" The proud Lolita lowered her head and looked at her toes. She whispered, "I feel uncomfortable for a few days every month." "There's no need to see the imperial physician." Li Yi didn't know how to respond to this question. The little Lolita had really grown up. In the past, she liked to hold his hand when she walked and would often cling to him like an octopus. Now that they were walking side by the lake, she wasn't as noisy as she used to be. She became exceptionally quiet, which made Li Yi feel a little uncomfortable. Sitting on the lawn by the lake, the proud Lolita softly talked about some interesting things that happened to her in the academy. For example, no matter what kind of chess they played, she had no match in the academy. Another time, when the mathematics teacher punished her friend, she asked Li Han to come up with a few questions to ask the mathematics teacher. In the end, the female teacher didn't come to class for 3 days. Li Xian and the eldest princess walked over from afar. Li Xian looked at the two of them and squatted down. He said, "Bing Ning, come with Brother Xian. Brother Xian will give you something fun to play with." Brother Xian, I've grown up. I don't play with those things anymore." Although the proud Lolita was unwilling, she was still dragged away by Li Xian. Li Yi lay comfortably on the grassy slope. Below him was a small lake. The lake water was dark green. The wind blew from the surface of the lake, bringing a refreshing coolness. This kind of weather was actually very suitable for barbecues or picnics. It was a pity that the old emperor had already arranged a banquet, and Mingzu sat beside him. She bent her legs and looked at the lake. She seemed to be thinking about something, and her gaze was slightly absent-minded. Li Xian walked over from afar and said, "I'm afraid that the two of you will attract suspicion if you're alone. It'll be better if I'm here." He took out 2 pieces of dough from his sleeves and stuffed them into his ears. He looked at Li Yi and said, "Don't worry, I can't see or hear anything. You guys can continue chatting." After he finished speaking, he walked to a place 10 feet away from the two of them and lay down on the ground. At the same time, in a palace somewhere in the courtyard, a girl in a white dress lay on the bed. She crossed her legs and swayed unconsciously. She flipped through the pages of a book and muttered, "The book says that girls should be reserved, but teacher doesn't seem to like it." Chapter 807. Being an emperor was actually very difficult, and being a diligent emperor was even more difficult. The old emperor was very diligent in political affairs, so his health was deteriorating day by day. Her Highness was a rare young expert in the world, but she had only experienced the Empress mode for a short period of time, and she was already so tired. There were many reasons for this. It was the first time she held such power in her hands, and she was not used to it. She did not know how to use it. First, some people in the court deliberately made things difficult for her. Second, they submitted all the big and small matters to her. Third, they encountered problems that they could not solve, so they submitted them all. With her serious personality, she could not pretend that she did not see it. In the long run, even an Iron Man would not be able to withstand it. Li Yi lay on the grass, his hands behind his head, and adjusted to a comfortable position. He said, "This can't go on." Mingzu tilted her head slightly and looked at him. "You have to build your own team. There are many things that you do not need to deal with personally. The burden of a country is all on you. Even 10 of you, 100 of you, would not be able to handle it." Mingzu looked at him and said, "It's not that I have not thought about this, but the relationships between the 3 provinces and 6 ministries are complicated. What kind of people should I choose? Of course, you need to know everything." Li Yi thought for a moment, and said, "The capital governor, Dong Wenyun, Magistrate Dong's character and ability, you should be able to trust him, right?" Mingzu nodded and said, "Magistrate Dong was personally promoted by my father. He is an honest and upright official with outstanding achievements. He has his own unique views on court affairs, and his character and ability are naturally trustworthy." Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Appointments, Li Mingzi, what do you think? Mingzu looked at him in surprise and asked, "Isn't Li Mingzi your second uncle?" External promotion does not avoid enemies, internal promotion does not avoid relatives. Have you heard of this saying? Li Yi looked at her and said righteously, "Although he is my second uncle, his work as an official is commendable and can be of great use." What do you think? That's true. Mingzi nodded and said, "If that's the case, then Assistant Minister of Revenue Tsing Shichen's ability has always been outstanding. If there are no accidents, it is very likely that he will take over the position of Minister of Revenue in the future. How about? Li Yi straightened his body and sat up. The Ministry of Revenue's Qin Darren is still here. Why did you find an assistant minister? Mingzu Li explained, Master Qin is in charge of the entire Ministry of Revenue. He can't leave easily, so he can only choose from the people below him. Isn't there another assistant minister? You have a grudge against assistant minister Zheng. What enmity could there be between us? Tsing Shichen, his character is questionable. Let's choose another assistant minister. Li Yi pursed his lips and said, besides, we don't avoid enemies and relatives. Even if we do have any enmity, it won't affect this matter. As an outsider, he ran to Willow Alley all day. Sometimes, before it was time for the yamen to open, he would still be there. This kind of person who came to work early and left early, had no organization or discipline, and only wanted to muddle along. Could he take on a big responsibility? The other assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue hasn't made any contributions in many years. Mingzu Li nodded and said, then, I will consider the candidate for the Ministry of Revenue. Li Yi thought about it and said, also, what do you think about the Wang family of Luochuan? Let me interrupt. Li Xian, who was lying on the other side of the grass, rolled over and said, the Wang family has always been loyal to the emperor and patriotism. Naturally, they are trustworthy. Saying this, he turned over again. I'm done. You can continue. Needless to say, the Wang family. In addition, one person must be selected from each of the 6 ministries. The Hall of Governmental Affairs, the school, these places also need to select some people, based on the principle of not avoiding enemies and relatives. The 2 of them excluded all the officials of the King of Shu. The selected officials were either outstanding or had relations with the princess's mansion and were trustworthy. After going through these names in his mind, Li Yi said, as for the Ministry of Penalty, there won't be any problem if Lu Yi takes care of it. By the way, the magistrate of the capital city, Lu Dao, is also a rare talent. Mingzu Li nodded and said, indeed, Magistrate Lu is very meticulous. The affairs of the academy are complicated, and ordinary people can't handle it. If I hand it over to him, there shouldn't be any mistakes, achoo. The magistrate of the capital city, Lu Dao, turned his back and sneezed. Then he turned his head and rubbed his nose. He picked up the chopsticks again and said to Mrs. Lu, boil some ginger soup for me later. I was busy until midnight yesterday. I'm afraid I caught a cold. Madame Lu glanced at him and said in a resentful tone, so you still know to work until midnight. Ahem, Magistrate Lu coughed twice, which meant that the child was still there and they shouldn't talk about these things. When he was about to pick up some food, he noticed that his daughter, who was sitting across from him, was looking at him, then at her mother, then at her older brother. Finally, she took out the small mirror that she had spent dozens of taels of silver to buy from her bosom and looked at herself for a while, muttering something to herself. Magistrate Lu frowned and knocked on the table, asking, what are you muttering to yourself instead of eating? After coming to the capital city, he was particularly strict with his children. Fortunately, both of them didn't let him down. His son had excellent grades in the arithmetic college, and his daughter was also one of the best in the women's college. Therefore, his tone of reprimand at this moment was not very strict. The girl said with a smile, hee, both father and mother have single eyelids. My brother and I also have single eyelids. We are both born by our parents. Magistrate Lu was stunned and said with a sullen face, what single eyelids and double eyelids? What nonsense are you talking about? How can you and my brother not be born by our parents? It was said in the science class. The girl said with some pride, young Mr. Qin said that if both parents have single eyelids, their children will also have single eyelids. If both parents can't distinguish between red and green, their children can't distinguish between red and green. nonsense. Magistrate Lu ate a mouthful of rice and said, Prince Chang and Princess Ching can't distinguish between red and green, but the little commandery princess can also distinguish between red and green. The reason why he was so clear about this matter was that a scandal happened in Prince Chang's mansion 2 days ago, which was discussed in the capital city. For some unknown reason, Qing Wang, who had always been known for his honesty, actually acted against Qing Wang Fei in his foo and even chased her back to her paternal home. He had also heard some rumors that said that Qing Wang's daughter wasn't his own. The little commandery princess dropped out of school 2 days ago. The girl looked at him, stuck out her tongue, and said in a small voice, I don't know why she suddenly dropped out. I have one less person to talk to in the college. Magistrate Lu was stunned for a moment, then waved his hand and said, even if it's not distinguishing between red and green, it's really like this. What does single eyelids and double eyelids have to do with whether or not they are biological? It's just nonsense. If you don't believe me, I'll give you an example, then. At a certain point, Magistrate Lu's body suddenly shook and his voice stopped abruptly. No. The girl shook her head and said, young Mr. Qin said that if the parents have double eyelids, the children may have single eyelids. If the parents have single eyelids, the children can't have double eyelids, unless, Magistrate Lu's face was pale and his body trembled. The bowl in his hand fell to the ground and broke into pieces, but he didn't care about it at all. He slumped on the chair and murmured, impossible, this is impossible, master, what's wrong with you? Seeing this scene, Mrs. Lu was so scared that her face turned pale. She hurriedly stood up and said loudly, hurry, go find a doctor. I'm afraid the master has a stroke. Magistrate Lu climbed up from the chair, looked at his daughter and asked, do all the students in your women's college know about this? No, they are all unwilling to take the science course. Only a few of us. The girl said with some regret, young Mr. Qin said that this was all said by Marquis Li. It's not written in the book. No one wants to listen, so she won't teach it in the future. Magistrate Lu had already sat back in the chair. His face was a little better than before, but he still couldn't help murmuring, this is impossible, this is impossible. Chapter 808. A good meal turned out like this. The young girl felt uneasy. She timidly walked over and whispered, Father, what's wrong? Oh, nothing. County Magistrate Lu calmed down. He waved his hand and said, nothing. Don't spread rumors about Prince Chang's little princess. Single eyelid, double eyelid. Don't mention it again. The young girl nodded obediently. I know. Everything that happened just now seemed to have been brushed aside so easily. You guys eat. I have something to do and have to go out. County Magistrate Lu stood up and walked out after saying that. When he walked to the door, he stopped and asked, oh, you just said that these things were taught by County Marquis Li. Which County Marquis Li? Which County Marquis Li? The one my father always talks about. Okay, I got it. County Magistrate Lu waved his hand and said, you guys eat first. I'm leaving. He quickly walked out of the door. When he crossed the threshold, he tripped and almost fell. Young master, what's the difference between the food rewarded by the emperor and the food outside? In the carriage, Fong looked inside and asked curiously. Li leaned against the carriage and said lightly, you want to know? How about taking you with us next time? That's too embarrassing. Fong rubbed his hands and asked, when is the next time? Li waved his hand. Nothing special. The skills of the imperial chefs in the palace are almost the same as your wife's. Fong curled his lips and said, young master, don't lie to me. The imperial chefs are the best chefs in the world. How can they be a chef in the palace if they don't have skills? Li glanced at him. Why do you think the little princess and the emperor always like to eat at our house? Old Fong froze for a moment, then immediately lost interest in the emperor's food. He turned his head and suddenly asked, "Young master, we're almost at Willow Lane. Do you want to go in and sit for a while? Since you're here, sit for a while." Li nodded and got off the carriage. Watching him walk into the alley, Fong comfortably leaned against the carriage. He let out a long sigh and said, "I'm so tired these days. It's better to follow the son-in-law." The sloppy old man, who had been sitting at the side with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and asked indifferently, "Do you know why your son-in-law didn't let you follow him these days?" Fong glanced at him and said, "Because the son-in-law has other, more important things for me to do. Because you talk too much." After the sloppy old man finished speaking, he closed his eyes again. "You are jealous." Fong glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and ignored him. He was really exhausted from the past few days. While his son-in-law was being affectionate inside, he should take a rest first. Not long after he closed his eyes, he heard footsteps coming from the front. Fong opened his eyes and asked in surprise, "Young master, why are you back? There's only Xiao Chui at home." Li got on the carriage and said, "Let's go back." Fong waved his whip and started the carriage. He turned around and asked curiously, "Young master, I have a question." Okay. If you're really curious about what the emperor usually eats, I'll bring some back for you next time." "Not this." Fong shook his head and asked curiously, "Miss Seng?" "Miss Seng doesn't need to say anything." "Miss Wan?" "Young master, what do you plan to do?" The sloppy old man, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. After glancing at him, he slowly closed them again. The carriage was silent for a long time before a voice came out. "Fong, recently, Lu Meng's side is a bit short on manpower." The carriage stopped in front of the new residence. Fong jumped off and said, "Young master, I'll go back and pack up. I'll stay in the league for a few days." "Forget it, Lu Meng, don't go. You'd better stay with me." Li waved his hand and said, "I didn't eat much at Hibiscus Garden. Go ask the kitchen to cook a few dishes and take out the jar of wine you've been hiding." "Young master, where am I?" "Go quickly." Although he did not know why the son-in-law asked him to go to the Lu Meng to help and changed his mind so quickly, to him, these two things were very interesting. There was no difference. However, he felt sorry for the jar of wine. It was really good wine. It was more mellow than the strong wine made in his workshop, but it was less chewy. He only hoped that the son-in-law could leave a few mouthfuls for him. However, thinking of the young master's tolerance for alcohol, he immediately felt relieved. When the young master moved to the city, he naturally bought a house nearby. He went home and found the jar of wine under the bed. When he brought it back, he saw someone pacing back and forth at the entrance of the residence. After taking a look, he strode over and patted him on the shoulder. He smiled and said, "Hey, old Lu, you're here to see my young master?" County Magistrate Lu was already preoccupied. When he was suddenly patted on the shoulder, he was almost scared out of his wits. When he saw the person who came, he patted his chest and said, "Brother Fong, is Serene home?" "Yes, I just came back." It was not easy to meet an acquaintance from the Qing and government in the capital. Fong put his arm around his shoulder and said, "Come, let's go in together." "Brother Fong, please let me know, what's there to tell? We're all on the same side, no need to be so polite." Sir Lu came at the right time. Li pointed to the table and said, "Sit." "Fong, go get another pair of chopsticks for Sir Lu." County Magistrate Lu hurriedly waved his hand. "Sir Li, no need, I've already eaten at home. If I tell you to sit, then sit. Stop talking nonsense." Fong pushed him into his seat and quickly brought 2 pairs of chopsticks from the kitchen. He also sat to the side. "Sir Lu, you've been busy with political affairs recently. It's really hard for you. You're welcome, sir. This is my duty. After the two chatted casually for a while, the dishes and wine were all served. Seeing County Magistrate Lu's pale face and absent-minded appearance, Li Yi wondered, Sir Lu, you came here today because something happened in the academy. Is there someone in the court who dares to stop you on the matter of the academy? No, no, no. County Magistrate Lu hurriedly shook his head and said, I came here this time because I have something to ask you, sir. At this moment, Li Yi was a little curious. He poured a cup of wine and said, Sir Lu, please say it. County Magistrate Lu thought for a while and said again after a moment, Sir Li, I have a friend. Pfft, this excuse was really old-fashioned. How stupid would one be to use it? Li Yi almost spat out the wine in his mouth. If he hadn't turned his head quickly, he would be the only one who could eat this table of dishes and wine today. County Magistrate Lu was stunned and asked, Sir Li, what's wrong with you? Cough, cough. Nothing, I'm fine. Sir Lu, what's wrong with your friend? Go on. Li Yi wiped his mouth and said while waving his hand. County Magistrate Lu nodded and said, I have a friend. He and his wife both have single eyelids, but their child has double eyelids. Li Yi put down the wine cup that he had raised and stared at County Magistrate Lu blankly. To be exact, he stared at County Magistrate Lu's eyelids. Well, single eyelids. Are you sure, Sir Lu? Sir Lu's friend and his wife have single eyelids, but their child has double eyelids. Is it because of a wrinkle or something? County Magistrate Lu shook his head and said, It shouldn't be. What should it not be? Is it true or not? County Magistrate Lu thought for a while and nodded. It can't be wrong. Li Yi suddenly smiled and pushed a plate of vegetables in front of him, saying, Come, come, come. This matter is not urgent. Lord Lu, eat more vegetables. It's almost winter, and there aren't many vegetables outside. Lord Lu, when you go home, you can bring some more. Chapter 809. I've already eaten at home. County Magistrate Lu looked at the plate of green vegetables in front of him and was startled. He said, Lord Li, I just want to ask. I suddenly had an inspiration and came up with a poem. Why don't you help me analyze it? County Magistrate Lu was startled again. He cupped his hands and said, Lord Li is the #1 scholar in the imperial court with unparalleled talent in poetry. I'm not talented and I don't dare. Li waved his hand and said, It's just an exchange. Lord Lu, you don't have to belittle yourself. It's nothing. County Magistrate Lu cupped his hands again and said, I'm all ears. Li smiled and said, I've traveled to some places in my early years. I've been to a place called Chilichuan at the foot of the Yin Mountain. Yin Mountain. County Magistrate Lu was puzzled. Lord Li, you've been to the north. Li nodded and said, Chilichuan is a good place. Seeing this plate of green vegetables, I suddenly thought of the boundless green grassland there. I couldn't help but feel a bit poetic. County Magistrate Lu, why don't you listen to it? Li had a thoughtful expression on his face. After a while, he said, Chilichuan, at the foot of the Yin Mountain. The sky is like a dome, covering the surrounding wilderness. Thousands of miles of Yin Mountain, Chilichuan Plain, the sky is vast and boundless, covering the surrounding wilderness. County Magistrate Lu nodded and said, Lord Li, you really have a wide range of knowledge. This poem has a broad realm and a majestic tone. It has the feeling of a northern folk song during the northern and southern dynasties. The sky is vast and the wilderness is boundless. These two lines describe the magnificence of the picture and the vastness of the wilderness. I live next door. My surname is Wang. Ah. County Magistrate Lu was startled and said with some uncertainty, the sky is vast and the wilderness is boundless. I live next door. My surname is Wang. The first line had been talking about the vastness of the world. This line changed too quickly. The strong contrast made him unable to believe his ears for a moment. Why? Lord Lu, you don't like this line. Li Yi thought for a moment, then said, then let's change it. The sky is vast, the field is boundless, a branch of red apricot wants to grow out of the wall. What does Lord Lu think of this sentence? Lord Li, I'm not as talented as you. County Magistrate Lu shook his head in shame and said, I just want to ask Lord Li. It was such an obvious hint, yet he couldn't understand it. It seemed like he had no choice but to make it clear. Li Yi sighed, walked over and said, no matter what, the child is innocent. I can't help much in this matter. Lord Lu, please reconsider. County Magistrate Lu was stunned for a moment before he asked, are you saying that if both parents have single eyelids, they really can't give birth to a child with double eyelids? Not necessarily. Li Yi thought about it and said, double eyelids and single eyelids are determined by genetics. Logically speaking, it's impossible for parents with single eyelids to give birth to a child with double eyelids. But nothing is absolute. Who knows, maybe the child's Mercury and Halley's comet will go in the opposite direction. If we don't save it, we won't change our fate. Fortunately, after practicing martial arts, he had deliberately exercised his body, and even his lung capacity had increased a lot. He didn't even gasp for breath when he said so many words. Li Yi took a sip of tea to moisten his throat, then he looked at County Magistrate Lu and asked, Lord Lu, do you understand? Mercury, comet, Halley, died, body. County Magistrate Lu looked at Li Yi in a daze, then he nodded and said, I understand. Understand. Li Yi looked at him in surprise and said, since you understand, Lord Lu, tell me about it. County Magistrate Lu coughed dryly and said, Lord Li, you mean that parents with single eyelids are also very likely to give birth to a child with double eyelids? Under normal circumstances, what was the probability of the gene mutation that controlled eyelids? It was 1 in a million or less. Li Yi didn't know, but the other possibility was much higher. Li Yi nodded and said, it's quite high. Jing Kingdom, Qi Kingdom, and maybe Zhao Kingdom. There should be 2 or 3. Jing Kingdom, Qi Kingdom, Zhao Kingdom. County Magistrate Lu was stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. Looking at his absent-minded look, Li Yi sighed and said, Lord Lu, life is unpredictable. Be strong. After a long time, County Magistrate Lu woke up from his absent-mindedness. He cupped his hands to Li Yi and said, Lord Li, I'll take my leave now. Seeing him stumble out, Li Yi glanced at Fong and said, go send Lord Lu back. Fong was holding the plate of green vegetables and eating. Hearing this, he raised his head and said, he's a grown-up. He doesn't need me to send him back. Don't you think so, old Lu? County Magistrate Lu stepped over the threshold. His body swayed and he turned his head and said, Fong, brother Fong, you'd better send me back. When Li Yi followed him out, a servant reported that a minister-counselor of the Ministry of Rights wanted to see him. An official walked in quickly and bowed, saying, Lord Li, Imperial Concubine Li's birthday is coming. I'm here to send an invitation. The rules of the royal family were strict. The birthday of imperial concubines in the harem also had a corresponding etiquette process. Imperial concubine Chui's position in the palace was second only to the empress, so her birthday was naturally held every year. Of course, it didn't require all the officials to participate. According to the rules of previous years, imperial concubine Chui would be allowed to go out of the palace to spend half a day with her relatives on the day of the birthday and then return to the palace in the middle of the night. This banquet was actually hosted by the Chui family. Although Li Yi and the Chui family had never been on good terms, with his current status, the Chui family would still routinely send him an invitation to all the officials even if there was any hatred. When the official from the Ministry of Rights saw Lu Dao, he was startled and immediately said, Lord Lu is also here. It saves me the trouble of making another trip. He rummaged for a while, took out another invitation, and handed it to County Magistrate Liu. Although the position of this capital magistrate was small, the power he held now was not small and couldn't be ignored. After the official from the Ministry of Rights left, seeing County Magistrate Liu staring blankly at the invitation in his hand, Li Yi casually asked, "Lord Liu is also going to Imperial Concubine Chui's birthday. I was invited last year and went once." County Magistrate Liu nodded and said, "It's not good for me to refuse such a thing." His eyes flickered. "I'm afraid I have to go again this year." Li Yi nodded and said, "I won't go to Imperial Concubine Chui's birthday, but I still have to send the gift. Do you think, if I send 50 eggs, isn't it a bit too much?" The Chui family had just been cheated of millions of taels of silver. It hadn't been a long time. How could they have spare money to hold a big birthday banquet for Imperial Concubine Chui? If the gift was too much, they couldn't take it back. "Well, we've arrived at the yamen. Old Liu, you can go in by yourself." The carriage stopped at the gate of the yamen. Fang jumped off the carriage and waved his hand. "I still have to go to the Jade's courtyard to discuss a big business, so I won't go in." He shook his head with some doubts. Before he left, the son-in-law specifically told him to keep an eye on County Magistrate Liu and not to let him do anything stupid. As a man and a county magistrate, how could he do something stupid? In a quiet courtyard at the back of the county yamen, County Magistrate Liu was lying on a recliner, holding the invitation in his hand and staring at something in a daze. It was a small garden. Madam liked red daffodils, second mother liked yellow chrysanthemums, and there was a nameless blue flower next to it, which was transplanted by his daughter a few days ago. However, at this moment, all he saw was darkness. Because the sky was falling. Chapter 8:10. I'm not very familiar with some of the people here, but since you've chosen them, they shouldn't be too far off. Li Yi put down the list in his hand and said, "That's it. Let's settle it for the time being. After a while, we'll have another assessment." The eldest princess nodded. She thought of something and said, "Today is Imperial Concubine Chui's birthday. Although you don't get along well with the Chui family, according to etiquette, you should also send a gift. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will attract criticism." The old madam had already warned him about this matter 2 days ago. According to etiquette, with Imperial Concubine Chui's rank, there were only a few people in the harem who were higher than her. After all, she was an imperial concubine. Since the Chui family had sent an invitation, even if he didn't intend to go in person, he had to prepare a gift to not appear disrespectful. Nowadays, he carried too many titles and wasn't as carefree as before. There were some things that he still had to pay attention to. Then send a few boxes of fresh vegetables. They're green and not commonly seen in this season. In the future, it would be very inappropriate to give such a gift, not to mention that it was given to an imperial consort. However, it was different here. In the current season, a handful of fresh vegetables could not be bought with money. In the past, when the old emperor bestowed the important officials, which of the vegetables were not wilted? They were definitely not as green as the ones he gave himself. That's fine. Although this gift isn't heavy, it's just a token of appreciation. Mingzi nodded and said, "A few years ago, the Chui family failed to win over Prime Minister Xin. The Xin family only sent an ordinary painting. Those important officials in the court who were unwilling to take sides were probably the same. Let's leave this matter as it is. Recently, there hasn't been any major events in the court. After this matter, you should rest for a while." Li Yi warned her, got up and said, "I'll go back first. I'm boiling soup at home. It should be almost done." He didn't know if it was because she was about to give birth in 2 months, but Rui had recently lost her appetite. He had developed several new kinds of soup, which were nourishing and had the effect of stimulating the appetite. Mingzi walked him to the door of the hall and suddenly asked, "Why don't you bring soup when you come here recently?" "Forget it, it doesn't seem to have any effect. I won't wear it in the future." Li Yi shook his head and sighed. Next time you come, bring some more. I quite like the soup. Her body stiffened slightly as she spoke in a calm tone. Then, she turned around and walked back into the bedroom. In front of the bed, the eldest princess, the first person in the Jing kingdom to personally lead the state affairs and supervise the country on behalf of the emperor, took off her coat and loosened her corset a little, since a few days ago, if the girdle was as tight as it used to be, he would find it hard to breathe. Every August, there would be 2 grand events in the capital. One of them was the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival on August 15th. It was a carnival for all the people in the capital. There was no curfew on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival. The whole capital was decorated with lanterns and streamers. The brothels, wine shops, and brothels were also open all night. It was very lively. Although noble consort Chui's birthday could not be compared with the Mid-Autumn Festival, the curfew was only delayed for 2 hours for the convenience of the guests. However, on August 23rd, the carriages and sedans lined up in front of the Chui family's house occupied at least 2 streets. The night had just fallen. 2 people were walking on the crowded street. One of them looked ahead and said in surprise, "Your Excellency, during noble consort Chui's birthday last year, the carriages and sedans of the guests were all lined up here, right?" County Magistrate Lu nodded and said, "I remember that there was a whole street less this year than last year." Detective Zhao thought for a moment and said, "No wonder. At this time last year, the king of Shu was still in the capital. Many officials naturally had to give face to the king of Shu." County Magistrate Lu did not continue, but he knew in his heart that even if the king of Shu was still in the capital today, the scene in front of the Chui family's house would not be much better than now. That was because some of the owners of the carriages that had been parked here last year had died. Some had been imprisoned, some had their properties confiscated, and some had been exiled. Some felt that there was no need for them to come here this year or in the future. Detective Zhao did not continue this topic, but asked again, "Your Excellency, are you still going to put down the gifts and go in for a while this year?" County Magistrate Lu shook his head and said, "You wait outside for a while tonight. You have sent such a generous gift, you have to eat some of it back." At this time, there were not many guests in front of the Chui family's house. County Magistrate Lu walked over and handed over the gift list. A servant of the Chui family looked through it and immediately bowed and said, "Your Excellency, please." In a side hall of the Chui family's house, Chui Qingze, the master of the Chui family, was holding a thin book in his hand with a slightly gloomy face. "Is that all?" The servant of the Chui family beside him said in fear, "That's all." Behind him, a middle-aged man had already stood up, and his face was extremely gloomy. "All?" The number of people coming to the house this year is not even half of last year's. Do they really think that the Chui family will collapse when Her Highness goes to Shuzhou? Another voice came from behind. Could it be that it's not the right time yet and many people are on the way? However, this voice was very low, as if even the owner of the voice knew that he did not have any confidence in saying this. Too many things have happened in the past year. Chui Qingze put down the book in his hand, took a deep breath, and said, "Don't mention this again. Her Highness will be here soon. Get ready." The Chui family's house today was not as lively as in previous years. The mansion was still crowded. Although the King of Shu's party was temporarily depressed, they were still a force that could not be ignored in the court. Some important guests would naturally not be with the majority of the people. In another quiet hall, the environment was much quieter than the other places in the mansion. His Majesty values filial piety very much. This time, for Her Highness's birthday, he did not allow Her Highness to return to the capital. The memorial jointly submitted by the Ministry of Rights was rejected as soon as it was submitted. Now, he wants the eldest princess to govern the country. What do you think His Majesty is thinking? There were only a few people in the hall. At this time, the one who spoke was the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. It seems that what Her Highness did last time really touched His Majesty's reverse scale. Sigh, I don't know who gave Her Highness the idea, but we didn't know anything. Otherwise, things would not have come to this. In the past year, you have seen how much we have lost. The Chui family today is completely incomparable to a year ago. Now, they want to build an academy and help the poor. Whether it is in the court or among the people, our influence cannot continue to be stable. Every year on Imperial Consort Chui's birthday, the officials and nobles in the court who had sided with the King of Shu would gather. It was a crucial day for the King of Shu's faction to plot together. Several people in the hall conversed softly. At a certain moment, someone suddenly raised his head and asked, "Now that Her Highness is in a difficult situation, I wonder what Assistant Minister Xing thinks." The few of them turned their gazes over. Although the Xing family had only risen in recent years and had a weak foundation, it could not be compared to families like the Chui family and the Qin family. However, Xing Shichen was an extremely powerful person. After plotting together for so many years, they had long understood this. Xing Shichen, who had been sitting there drinking tea since he stepped into the hall, raised his head and looked around blankly. He nodded and said, "The tea is good, not bad." "Lord Chen, what do you think?" Chen Chong raised his teacup and took a sip. He said calmly, "Lord Xing is right. This tea is not bad." Just as he finished speaking, there was a commotion outside. A servant of the Chui residence hurried in to report that Imperial Consort Chui had arrived. "This tea is not bad." Just as he finished speaking, there was a commotion outside. A servant of the Chui residence hurried in to report that Imperial Consort Chui had arrived. "Husband, can you really tell so much from single eyelids and double eyelids?" When Li Yi was telling a bedtime story as usual, Rui looked at Li Yi and asked in surprise when she heard him mention something. "Actually, there are many things in this world that follow a pattern." Li Yi smiled as he tucked her in. "It's not difficult to verify this. All you need to do is find parents with single eyelids and look at their children." Rui thought for a while and said in surprise, "That's true." In the past, in the Willow Leaf Village, there were a few couples with single eyelids. Their children really don't seem to have double eyelids. She looked at Li Yi and said with a smile, "However, who would stare at other people's eyelids when they have nothing better to do? How boring is that?" To discover these patterns, one must be very meticulous. "But, how did husband find out?" "That's not necessarily true." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Perhaps there really are people who are meticulous and bored." Chui residence. When the graceful and luxurious Imperial Consort Chui walked in from the front, the guests stood on both sides and nodded slightly. In the innermost part of the crowd, one person quietly raised his head. Chapter 8:11. The surname Chui was not an ordinary one in the Jing Kingdom. There were many families with the surname Chui in the Jing Kingdom, but the Chui family that people often mentioned only referred to the Chui family of Wang Province. As a prestigious clan that had been passed down for a few hundred years, it had experienced the change of dynasties, the change of ownership of the land, and how many imperial powers had been destroyed before rising again. But the Chui clan was still the Chui clan, and it stood towering on that piece of land without collapsing. It was truly even more stable than the imperial family. Of course, it wasn't because the Chui clan's military strength was strong, and it possessed an army of its own that caused the imperial family to be extremely fearful of it. It was instead because the Chui clan had been passed down for a few hundred years, and it was even to the extent that the Chui clan had an extremely high prestige in the hearts of the scholars in the Moon Prefecture, the neighboring prefectures, and even the entire world. It was easy to destroy the Chui family, but at the same time, it also destroyed the people's trust in the royal family. Therefore, even decades ago, when the Chui family was at its peak and could even control the court, the royal family did not take any extreme measures against the Chui family. Of course, since the emperor ascended the throne, he had deliberately supported the poor and adopted a strategy of slowly nibbling away at the power of the noble families in the court. In the past 20 years, the Chui family's influence in the court had been greatly weakened. Especially in this year, the Chui family's arrangements in the court for more than 10 years had almost suffered a destructive blow, and their reputation was no longer as strong as before. However, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The Chui family's disciples were all over the world, and they still had a reputation among the people. Moreover, they had a daughter who was the imperial concubine. Even if their influence was not as strong as before, they should not be underestimated. Moreover, the prince that imperial concubine Chui gave birth to was the current emperor's eldest son. According to the rules of etiquette, after the king of Shu ascended the throne, the Chui family's power would definitely reach a new peak. Every year, during imperial concubine Chui's birthday, she would appear for a short while at the Chui family's residence. This was also one of the few opportunities that some low-ranking officials had to see the beauty of the imperial concubine. Of course, when the imperial concubine walked over, most people would lower their heads to pay their respects, and they would even miss this opportunity. Therefore, no one noticed that in the crowd, the governor of the capital, Lu Dao, had lowered his head and looked at imperial concubine Chui, who was walking over slowly. Then he lowered his head again and moved his lips without making any sound. If someone knew how to read lips, they would naturally be able to read what he said. Damn it, it's too far, I can't see it clearly. It was the birthday of the noble consort. According to the rules of etiquette, there was a set of complicated procedures that had to be followed in the palace during the day. When noble consort Chui arrived at the Chui residence from the palace, it was already night time. Even though the Chui residence was brightly lit with lanterns and streamers, it was not difficult to see noble consort Chui's appearance from the back of the crowd at a distance of half a zhang. However, if one wanted to see more details, such as the color of noble consort Chui's lipstick, whether she had too much makeup on her face, whether she had a single eyelid and so on, he couldn't see these clearly. Family concubine family members. Although imperial concubine Chui was born in the Chui family, her identity had changed since she entered the palace. Her relationship with the Chui family had changed. Therefore, when she walked in slowly with the help of a palace maid, the head of the Chui family and the members of the Chui family were waiting respectfully in front of her. In the crowd, a minister of the Ministry of Rites lowered his head and waited for imperial concubine Chui to walk past him. He was still thinking, I don't know what imperial concubine Chui looks like. Last year, I didn't dare to raise my head. This year, I'm standing a little forward, but I still don't dare to raise my head. Just when he was hesitating whether he should glance at her or not, he suddenly felt a huge force behind him. He staggered and fell forward. Thump. The minister of the Board of Rites knelt on the ground. Before he could get up, he felt something pressing down on him from behind. Then, there was a panicked voice. Who pushed me just now? Clang. Several guards rushed out from behind imperial concubine Chui. They unsheathed their weapons and pointed at the two people in front of them. Who are you? His eyes were blinded by the cold light on the tip of the saber. The minister of the Ministry of Rites had just stood up when he slumped back down. A middle-aged man got up from the ground and said in a panic, I don't know who pushed me from behind just now and disturbed your highness. Please forgive me. What's going on? Who are you? The head of the Chui family and the rest of the Chui family hurried over and asked with a gloomy face. The surrounding officials were also stunned because of this matter. Some people recognized the identity of the two men and immediately whispered to each other. Isn't that Minister Zhang of the Ministry of Rites? That seems to be Lord Lu, the capital magistrate. Why did the two of them run out? They said they were pushed by someone. Who would do such a senseless thing? Only then did the head of the Chui family, Chui Qingzi, realize that it was a false alarm. He relaxed and was about to speak with a frown when imperial concubine Chui's voice came. Since there's nothing else, forget it. Go in first. Thank you, Your Highness. Your Highness is generous. County Magistrate Lu respectfully stood where he was and bowed to Imperial Concubine Chui. When he raised his head, his face was full of gratitude and respect. Then he returned to where he was and stood there respectfully. Imperial Concubine Chui was indeed Imperial Concubine Chui. Her eyes were probably the most beautiful single eyelids he had ever seen. The head of the Chui family vaguely glared at County Magistrate Lu and the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. Then he turned his head and stretched out his hand, saying, Your Highness, please. Although today was Imperial Concubine Chui's birthday banquet, for most people, they could only glance at Imperial Concubine Chui when they lowered their heads. After Imperial Concubine Chui and the core members of the Chui family entered the main residence, the atmosphere outside began to warm up again. When fireworks began to bloom in the sky above the Chui residence, Yu Dingfeng, the patriarch of the Yu family, who was sitting at a table in a hall, smiled and said, If you want to talk about fireworks, you'll have to depend on Duke Chen's residence. Brother Chui, next year, you'll have to learn from Brother Qin. The head of the Chui family smiled but did not speak. Chen Chong led the guards of the Qin family to attack the Yu family's residence and even tore down the main gate of the Yu family's residence. Although the Yu family later paid a price to settle the matter, the enmity between the two families was considered to be formed. Everyone present was an old fox. Everyone knew that although Yu Dingfeng's words seemed to be praising, they were actually saying that the birthday banquet of the third miss of the Qin family was far grander than even Imperial Concubine Chui's birthday banquet. The Yu family had made a great contribution in the matter of the academy. It could be said that they single-handedly hindered the development of the academy, allowing the Chui family and many other aristocratic families to preserve their power. Although the Yu family was not as deep-rooted as the Qin family, with the Yu family's achievements, in the eyes of the Chui family and His Highness, the King of Shu, it was only a matter of time before the Yu family surpassed the Qin family. In fact, Chui Qing's attitude just now was already vaguely showing this trend. Beside the table, a trace of displeasure appeared on Qin Qing's face. However, Chen Chong acted as if he did not hear or see it. He pointed to a dish in front of him, turned his head and whispered to Tsing Shichen who was sitting next to him, This dish is not bad. Lord Tseng, please try it. After tasting it, Tsing Shichen nodded and said, It is indeed good. Lord Chen, why don't you try this? This scene caused many people to be puzzled. This second master of the Qin family and this one from the Xing family, other than occasionally discussing important matters together, had never had any contact. When did they become so close? At a table outside the hall, a few young people were toasting each other. Suddenly, one of them paused and suddenly said, Look, who is that? Everyone's eyes looked over. Lu Dao. It's him. He actually came today. Many young masters in the capital, including young Duke Qin, had suffered a lot in the hands of this county magistrate Lu. Everyone naturally had a deep impression of him. Tsing Zijian looked over in confusion and murmured, Doesn't this person always follow Li Yi's lead? Why is he here today? Could it be, is he expressing goodwill to the Chui family? I'm afraid it's a little too late to express goodwill now. Seeing Lu Dao, someone felt a dull pain in his buttocks and said coldly, Shi Xin, why don't you go over and check him out? If he really has the intention to express goodwill to the Chui family, you can let him off for what he has done in the past. If he harbors ill intentions and has ulterior motives, today, Chui Shishi nodded and stood up with a trace of a smile on his face. This is the Chui family, a small capital magistrate, At the banquet of the Chui family, close friends gathered at the table, drinking and chatting. Since they were on the side of the King of Shu and personally came to attend the birthday banquet of the imperial concubine, they naturally kept in touch with each other. It was rare to see someone like County Magistrate Lu drinking alone in silence. Of course, it was precisely because he occupied a table alone in the corner that no one was willing to sit with him. Naturally, no one could hear the words he whispered while drinking alone. Single eyelid, double eyelid. Damn it, What is this? Damn it, if I had known this, I wouldn't have come today. Motherf asterisk cur, who would believe such a thing? I can't say it now. The Chui family, he, Lord Lu. Chui Shixin came from behind with a wine glass in his hand and was about to speak with a smile. Damn it. County Magistrate Lu turned his head and said with a depressed face, extremely impatient. Chapter 8:12. The Chui family was a big family that had existed for hundreds of years, with numerous branches and numerous clansmen. Chui Shixin was a direct descendant of the Chui family. Although his status in the Chui family couldn't be compared with that of Chui Qingyu, he was also an outstanding disciple of the younger generation of the Chui family. In today's banquet, he could be regarded as half a host. Chui Shixin had no official position. Outside of the Chui family, others would give him a little face out of respect for the Chui family, but they might not regard him as a person of importance. However, within the Chui family, as the master, Chui Shixin's status and identity would increase imperceptibly in everyone's hearts. At this moment, he held a glass of wine and walked towards the direction of the magistrate of the capital city. Although he had suffered a loss in the hands of this person, he naturally dared not to make things difficult for him without the permission of the elders if he really abandoned the darkness for the light and came to the Chui family to express his goodwill. Walking behind him, Chui Shixin heard that the magistrate seemed to be whispering something. He smiled and said, Magistrate Lu, you motherf asterisk cur. At this moment, County Magistrate Lu was full of contradiction and annoyance. When he was cursing in a low voice to relieve the depression in his heart, he heard a voice behind him. Therefore, he turned around subconsciously and uttered the following words naturally. Chui Shixin held a glass of wine and the smile on his face froze. After hearing what he just said, his eyes gradually became cold. What did you just say? County Magistrate Lu was stunned, then he reached out and patted his shoulder, saying, You motherf asterisk cur, the weather is so cold, don't you know to wear more clothes? If you catch a cold, you will suffer. You young people don't know how to take care of your body at all. He held up the glass of wine and gently touched the glass in Chui Shixin's hand. After drinking up the wine in the glass, he waved his hand, Child Chui, I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. After saying that, he stood up and strode towards the direction of the Chui mansion. Stop! Chui Shixin suddenly smashed the wine glass in his hand, turned around and pointed at the leaving figure of County Magistrate Lu. When he walked over just now, not many people paid attention to him except those young figures. At this moment, he smashed the glass angrily in front of so many people, which made many people stunned on the spot. Today is the birthday of Imperial Concubine Chui. What's wrong with the third child of the Chui family? Isn't that person the magistrate of the capital city? How did he provoke the third child of the Chui family? How did he offend the third child of the Chui family come to the banquet today? Smashing the cup. Could it be that smashing the cup is the signal? Could it be that the Chui family wants to take advantage of noble consort Chui's birthday banquet to catch all those who don't listen to their orders? County Magistrate Lu stopped and turned his head and turned, asking, Child Chui, child of Chui Chui. Chui Shixin glared at him. How dare you insult my mother? Nonsense, Chui Lu of Chui Cun. Chui Shixin of Lu of Kyuf Chui Chui, Chui, County of Lu of Kyuf Kyuf County of. Chui Shixin of County of Axayan of Chui. County Magistrate Lu smiled and said, 2 days ago, the weather suddenly became cold. My son didn't put on clothes and caught a cold. He hasn't recovered yet and is recuperating at home. When I saw Child Chui Shao of County, I thought of my son and couldn't help being a little anxious. Chui Shixin was a little embarrassed by his words and said angrily, Your son is your son, I am me. County Magistrate Lu hurriedly waved his hand and explained, Child Chui, you are right. I don't have a son like you. You. Cui Shixin's face was full of anger again. At this time, a figure came hurriedly behind him. What's wrong? What happened? A middle-aged man walked out of the hall and looked at Cui Shixin. Cui Shixin pointed at County Magistrate Liu. After moving his lips, he lowered his head and said, "Fourth uncle, it's nothing. Lord Liu wants to leave and I will see him off." He was very clear that the most important thing today was the birthday banquet of the imperial concubine. Not to mention him, even his father would not be able to get away if something happened at the birthday banquet. He was irritated by the rude words of Liu just now. Now that he calmed down, he immediately broke into a cold sweat. "Child Cui, don't be so polite. I know the way." County Magistrate Liu looked at him with a smile and turned away decisively. The servants of the Cui family cleaned up the broken pieces. When Cui Shixin walked back to the table, several people immediately surrounded him. What happened there just now? What does that Liu want to do? Cui Shixin's face was extremely gloomy. He told them what happened just now in detail. One of them was shocked and said, "In the Cui family, Liu Dao dared not to give you face. Why did he come here today?" Tsing Zijian was astonished. What's going on? Could it be that Liu Dao came here today just to cause trouble? Who gave him the guts to do so? Li Yi, it must be Marquis Li Yi of Cheng and County. In another place, an official lowered his voice and said, "Everyone in the capital city knows that the capital magistrate Liu Dao works for Marquis Li Yi of Cheng and County. Marquis Li Yi is not on good terms with the Cui family. There is no reason for him to come here today. It turns out that he just came yes, when the imperial concubine came here, it seemed that he directly rushed out to block the way." The conversation between him and the third young master of the Cui family was obviously a public joke. The third young master of the Cui family is still too young to take advantage of this old fox verbally. However, this Liu Dao is really bold. He even dared to make trouble at the birthday banquet of the imperial concubine. Marquis Li Yi is too strong. The Cui family can't do anything to him, but he is just a small capital magistrate. He's going too far. He's going too far. A man of the Cui family slapped the table and said angrily, "He really thinks that the Cui family can come and go as he pleases. Why didn't we stop him just now?" The fourth uncle of the Cui family glanced at him and said, "He is after all a fifth-grade capital magistrate and works for the princess. You know who is in charge in the court now. Besides, what reason can he use to detain an official of the court? Do you think the Cui family is still the same Cui family as before?" The man said with a sullen face, "Are we going to let so many people see our Cui family as a joke? Fortunately, it's just a small conflict between Xiaxian and him. The impact hasn't spread." The fourth uncle of the Cui family knocked on the table with his index finger and said, "The matter of the academy has come to an end. If there is no accident, it won't be long before the eldest princess's academy can't be run anymore. With such a big oversight, we don't need to do anything. At that time, the officials won't allow her to continue to manage the government. At that time, we can slowly deal with the capital magistrate. However, County Marquis Li and Dr. Li have really gone too far by making trouble in our Cui mansion during the concubine's birthday." Outside the Cui mansion, Detective Xiao saw his master coming out from inside and said in surprise, "Master, is it over? Why are you back so soon? Have you eaten your capital back?" He was extremely curious at the moment. What did his master eat inside? How could he eat such a generous gift in such a short time? County Magistrate Liu shook his head and said, "Not much. I came back after drinking a few cups of wine." Detective Xiao thought for a while and asked, "Then, did you see the imperial concubine?" "Yes." County Magistrate Liu nodded. Detective Xiao looked curious and asked, "What does the imperial concubine look like? How is she different from ordinary women?" Shut up. County Magistrate Lu glanced at him and said lightly, a loose tongue can cause trouble. You can't talk about the affairs of the royal family at will. Do you want your head or not? Detective Zhao was stunned for a moment and then came to his senses. He slapped himself and said repeatedly, Master, please forgive me. I deserve to be slapped for my foul mouth. I deserve to be slapped. You'd better remember this. County Magistrate Lu looked at him and said in a low voice, in the future, don't ask what you shouldn't ask and don't say what you shouldn't say. Chapter 8:13. Safe Journey, Your Highness. Safe Journey, Your Highness. Although Imperial Consort Chui could leave the palace to reunite with her family on her birthday, she could not spend the night outside the palace. She had to return to the palace before the palace gates closed. At this time, the banquet at the Chui residence had not ended. Seeing the Chui family escorting Imperial Consort Chui out, all the officials and nobles present rose to send Imperial Consort Chui back to the palace. After that, the people who came to the Chui residence for the banquet also began to leave. After almost all the guests had left, Yu Dingfeng, the Marquis of Ningyuan, sighed in front of the Chui residence and said, Her Highness is extremely dissatisfied with what we have done in the past year. If the situation continues to develop like this, the foundation that we have painstakingly built in the court over the past decades will be completely destroyed. Chui Qingze, the master of the Chui family, cupped his hands and said, The success or failure of the academy depends on the Yu family. Brother Chui, rest assured, everything is under control. Yu Dingfeng smiled and returned the greeting before saying, It's getting late. Brother Chui, I will also take my leave. Beside him, Chen Qing also raised his head. We are also leaving. Chui Qingze smiled and said, Second brother, please see the two lords Chen off. A man behind Chui Qingze stepped forward and looked at Chen Chong and his brother. He smiled and said, Lords, please. The Yu family cannot be underestimated in the future. On the carriage returning to the residence, Chen Qing, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. They were all of the King of Shu's faction. Chui Qingze had just asked Second Master Chui to see them off while he himself sent Yu Dingfeng off. This subtle difference was a very clear signal to them. Chen Chong, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them and said lightly, The Yu family cannot be saved. What? Chen Qing frowned and asked, What do you mean? Chen Chong looked back and asked, Big brother, who do you think the Emingzhu Academy belongs to? The academy was named after the eldest princess. From its establishment to its operation, everything was handled by the eldest princess. As Chen Qing spoke, his voice gradually became softer. He looked at Chen Chong and asked, You mean, the Marquis of Chang'an County, Li Yi? Although outsiders knew that the Emingzhu Academy was established by the Princess Royal Highness for the poor, the conversation between the Princess Royal Highness and the Marquis of Chang'an County in the Imperial Garden that day was known by almost everyone in the court. They all knew that the matter of the Academy, although it was in the name of the Princess Royal Highness, the things behind the scenes were all done by the Marquis of County Li. Chen Qing frowned. Even if it's him, it might not be. Has Big Brother ever seen him lose? Chen Qing's voice stopped abruptly. After a moment of silence, he asked, Is this the only reason? Isn't this reason enough? Chen Chong looked at him and shook his head. Ever since the Princess Royal Highness visited the Yu family and was rejected several times, the Princess Royal residence would send people to the Yu family every day to discuss. In the beginning, they would stay for a day, half a day, 4 hours, and an hour. Later, they would only stay in front of the Yu residence for less than a quarter of an hour. What can this mean? Tsing Shichin said that this means that the Yu family is about to be finished. Assistant Minister Tseng. Chen Qing was startled and his expression changed slightly. Assistant Minister Tseng is a meticulous person and rarely makes mistakes in the matters he has handled. If this is really the case, I'm afraid I have to warn you Dingfeng. If this spoils the lady's plans, turn. He lifted the curtain with one hand. Before he could finish the word, turn around, another hand reached out from the side and closed the curtain again. Chen Qing turned to look at him and said in surprise, "Second brother, you are." Chen Chong did not speak and leaned back against the carriage. Chen Qing just looked at him like this. Some thoughts surged in his mind and his expression gradually changed. What? Last night at the Chui family, County Magistrate Lu really did that? When he heard this news from Fong, even Li Yi himself was a little surprised. He didn't know much about County Magistrate Lu, but he knew how daring he was. After knowing him for so long, Li Yi felt that it was impossible for him to be wrong. He actually dared to verbally humiliate the Chui family's third young master at Imperial Consort Chui's birthday banquet in front of so many officials and nobles. No matter how he looked at it, this didn't seem like something that County Magistrate Lu would do. That's right, I also find it strange. Fong also said with a surprised expression, this old Lu usually looks very timid. I didn't expect him to be so hot-blooded, perhaps. Lord Lu is not in a good mood. It's understandable. No matter what, he was still a fifth-rank official of the imperial court and a talent that Her Highness the Empress valued. As long as he didn't directly contradict Imperial Consort Chui and play around with the younger generation of the Chui family, no one could do anything to him. However, what Li Yi couldn't understand was that even if he wanted to draw a clear line with the Chui family and the King of Shu, why did he choose this time? Moreover, with his cautious character, how could he do things without leaving any room for retreat? I also don't understand why Lord Lu is so anxious to draw a clear line with the Chui family or the King of Shu. Even if he really wants to show his loyalty to County Marquis Li, he doesn't have to do this. In a secluded room of a tea house in Willow Lane, Tsing Shichen shook his head with some doubts on his face. There are rumors outside that this person was instructed by Li Yi to do that last night. Chen Chong took a sip of tea and asked, how do you know that he wants to draw a clear line with the Chui family? Tsing Shichen put down the teacup and said, although I don't know why he is so anxious, Lu Dao is a smooth and slick person. He is also extremely cautious. If there is no reason, he wouldn't do such a reckless thing. Especially his behavior last night, it seems that he deliberately put on a show for others to see. Cautious? Chen Chong laughed coldly and said, he is the bravest and most arrogant Jingdo magistrate in history. Many playboys in the capital have suffered at his hands. You say that he is cautious. The Qin family should know very well how difficult the position of Jingdo magistrate is. Tsing Shichen glanced at him and said, but this Lord Lu has done many arrogant things and offended many people. But his position is becoming more and more stable, and there is even a faint trend of him moving up. Lord Chen thinks that he is just relying on luck. But after what happened last night, I can no longer see through this person. Even you can't see through him. Chen Chong started and said, Dong Wenyun, Lu Yi, and now even this Lu Dao, what kind of people come out from Qing and Prefecture? This person is acting so strangely. Something must have happened. However, we are not on his side, so it is not good to ask. He glanced down and said, third mistress has come out. Official Qin should leave. Chen Chong stood up and raised his hands. Official Tsing is going down anyway, let's go together. Cut ties. In a private room in a brothel somewhere in the capital, a middle-aged man sat there. His eyes narrowed slightly as he muttered, just what has happened? This person, Lu Dao, the man beside him asked in confusion, Fifth Master, what did you say? The middle-aged man withdrew his gaze. His eyes seemed to drift as he looked at the man and asked, Wu Er, how long have you been by my side? Yes. The man named Wu Er scratched his head and counted with his fingers. Yes, it's been a long time. So it has been that long. The middle-aged man stretched his body and said, go downstairs and buy some preserved fruits from Fuji. After the man left, the middle-aged man reclined on the couch and looked down at the stage. He muttered, "You family, who will be next?" The servant's voice trembled, reporting to Patriarch, "There are several shops in the capital that have returned goods and there are a long queue." Yu Dingfeng let go of his collar and forced himself to calm down. He asked, "Have you found out who the people behind these shops are? And what kind of paper is that? If this was just a competitor's malicious suppression, then it would be fine." However, he knew better than anyone how high the cost of papermaking was. The higher the quality, the higher the cost. If he sold it at a low price, he wouldn't even be able to recoup the cost. Naturally, it wouldn't last long. If it was just a malicious suppression by a competitor, it would be fine. He knew better than anyone else how high the cost of making paper was. The higher the quality, the higher the cost. If they sold it at a low price, they wouldn't be able to recover the cost. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to last long. What's more, in order to let the Academy buy more paper at a high price so that they could profit from it, the Yu family had invested all their money and hoarded a large amount of goods. If, and only if, there was a cheap and high-quality paper on the market, causing no one to be willing to buy the Yu family's paper, then the Yu family would really be at the end of their rope. "I can't find out their background." The servant looked at Yu Dingfeng and whispered, "I've sent someone to check the quality of the paper. It's indeed of high quality and has never appeared on the market before." Before the servant finished speaking, the voice of the man surnamed Shui came over. Brother Yu, what's wrong with you? Brother Yu, wake up." After Yu Dingfeng's philtrum was pinched by the man surnamed Shui, he slowly regained consciousness. Only then did he feel a chill on his back, his countenance was even paler. "Go, send someone to the princess mansion," he said. No, prepare the carriage, quickly prepare the carriage, I will go personally." Although the eldest princess had always lived deep in the palace, the princes and princesses could open a mansion outside the palace after they came of age. This time, the Academy's supply of paper had always been communicated with the Yu family by the people of the princess's mansion. Yu Dingfeng urged the coachman all the way. He didn't care if the imperial censor would see him driving the carriage around in the capital. He hurriedly got off the carriage when they arrived in front of the princess's mansion. After being brought into the princess's mansion, he waited in a side hall. He was nervous. He didn't know how many times he had brewed a cup of tea. He didn't see a female official slowly walk in until it was tasteless. Yu Dingfeng hurriedly got up and said directly, "I'm here today to supply paper to the Academy." The female official looked at him and smiled. "There are a few new paper shops in the capital. Do you know about them?" Yu Dingfeng's legs went soft and he fell heavily back on the chair. How could this be? How could this be? Chen Qing paced in the hall, occasionally glancing at Chen Chong who was sitting there drinking tea. He said, "It's only been a few days since that night." In other words, before that, someone had already been plotting against the Yu family. Isn't this normal? Chen Chong looked up at him and asked, "What did the Chui family say?" Chui Qingze flipped the table on the spot. "This is no longer just a matter of not stopping the establishment of the Academy." Chen Qing said irritably, "This time, the Yu family has done their best to bring down the eldest princess. And it is because of this that there will be no more Yu family in the future." Chen Chong shook his head and said, "Yu Dingfeng is too greedy." After the incident with the foreign merchants, the Chui family was greatly weakened. Now that there is no more Yu family, it is like the Chui family has lost an arm. And this arm was deliberately cut off. Someone purposely cut it off. Chen Qing's brows furrowed. He was suddenly shocked and asked, "You mean, he has already begun to plot?" "Impossible, impossible. He only has a personal grudge with the king of Shu. He has never been close to any of the princes. Prince Jean is too young, and His Majesty has so many princes who have grown up. It can't be Prince Jean. This doesn't make sense, and it is not in accordance with the law. The only person he is close to is the eldest princess. Could it be that he wants to help the eldest princess ascend the throne? This is naturally impossible. Chen Chong shook his head and said, "But I feel that this is only the beginning. Let's just wait and see." He stood up and looked at Chen Qing. He said slowly, "Perhaps it is time for our Chen family to consider this carefully, at the Qin family banquet." Qin Yan sighed and said, "This time, the Yu family completely has no chance of making a comeback. After this, the large clans that rely on the paper market will at least be greatly weakened. If they stake everything on one throw like the Yu family, even the entire clan will be implicated." He said a few words and saw Qin He, who was playing with a 7-year-old urchin. Qin Yan couldn't help but frown and say, "Old Fifth, can you not fool around like this? Can't you do something serious? Ah, Fifth uncle is an elder. You should respect your elders and not fight with me." The fifth master of the Qin family was playing with the child of Qin Yan's concubine. When he heard this, he raised his head and had a stunned expression. "Big brother, I'm doing something serious every day, watching a play and listening to music. This is what you mean by serious business?" Fifth Master Qin was at a loss. Could it be that this doesn't count? Everything is being arranged according to what you said. In the future, the price of paper will definitely plummet. The situation like the Yu family, where one family dominates the market, will no longer appear. Of course, even if it does, it will be us dominating the market. As Li Xian spoke lazily, he suddenly thought of something. He sat up and asked in confusion, "Now, can you tell me what the second type of paper is used for?" Chapter 8:15. Wipe my butt. This somewhat vulgar, or even vulgar, answer clearly did not satisfy Li Xian. Using paper to do such a thing was no longer just a matter of disgracing the culture. He still felt that this kind of paper had some use that he did not know. Li Yi shook his head. "You see, you asked me, and I told you, but you didn't believe me. Forget it, I will know one day." Li Xian gave up asking, curled his lips, and turned to leave. When he stepped out of the door, he stopped and thought for a moment, but a strange expression appeared on his face. Maybe, it seems, that it really works. In the courtyard, Li Yi opened an envelope and took out a few pieces of paper. This was the news that had just been sent by the nets above, snares below. So much money had been invested, and it had not only made a splash, but also had a stable source of news from the court to the martial arts world. Today's news was all about the Yu family. This time, the Yu family had used almost all of their power to drag down the academy. However, they had not expected that once the improved paper was released, the secret recipe that the Yu family treasured as much as their lives would become worthless. From then on, their paper mill business would no longer be able to continue. They could not sell the large amount of paper they had stockpiled, and the additional equipment, manpower, and material resources were almost all wasted. They might even owe a lot of debts. However, if they sold the improved paper at a price lower than the improved paper, it was estimated that they would only lose about 90% of their profits. They could still recover some of the cost, which was enough for the Yu family to survive this difficult winter. The closure of the largest paper mill in the Jing Kingdom, the Yu family, proved one thing. Business was risky, and one had to be cautious. No matter how rich a family was, it could go bankrupt overnight. The Cui family was like this, and so was the Yu family. The Li family had much more business outside than these two families, so they must learn a lesson and do their business in a down-to-earth manner. They must not be too arrogant, and they must not forget their original intentions to succeed. The old emperor said that the Yu family had made some contributions to the empire in the past. In this time of crisis, if it was convenient for them to lend a helping hand, it would be better for them to do so. Out of the spirit of humanitarianism, he would have Her Royal Highness send someone to buy the paper that the Yu family couldn't sell at 10% of the price of the improved paper. This way, at least for this winter, they wouldn't have to worry about starving or freezing to death. Brother Chui, save the Yu family. You must save the Yu family this time. In just 2 days, Yu Dingfeng, the head of the Yu family, had a face full of stubble, and his eyes were bloodshot. Chui Qingze had lost count of how many times he had been pestered by Yu Dingfeng in the past 2 days. With an impatient expression on his face, he said, "That kind of improved paper is indeed of a much higher quality than the Yu family's paper. Moreover, it's so cheap. Everyone in the world can see that. What can I do? As long as I can obtain that modification method, you still want the improvement method?" Chui Qingze waved his sleeves and said, "Do you know who is behind those paper shops? The Crown Prince of Ning, Her Royal Highness, the Wang family. When you rejected the eldest princess 3 times, you should have expected that this day would come. Not to mention my Chui family, even Her Highness can't interfere in this matter. From now on, the development of the entire paper industry in the Jing Kingdom will be turned upside down." Yu Dingfeng sat back in his chair in a daze, the last trace of blood draining from his face. This time, what the Yu family lost was not only the shining silver, but also the foundation of the Yu family in the Jing Kingdom. Once the improved paper was released, who would be willing to buy the Yu family's paper? In the future, the Yu family would only be left with Ning Yuanho's estate. Without credit, even if His Royal Highness King of Shu ascended to the throne in the future, the Yu family would have no value. What kind of generous reward could they get? Yu family, Yu family. From today onwards, there would be no Yu family. The Yu family has some foundation. After this incident, they won't completely fall. However, without the famous paper shops in the Jing Kingdom, and without anyone in the court, the decline is only a matter of time. They want to obstruct the development of the academy for their own interests, so there is nothing to be pitiful about. With a single thought, she could decide the major events of the country. After a long time, Her Royal Highness also developed some temperament or momentum that she didn't have before. The centipede dies, but it doesn't fall down. Although the power of the King of Shu is not as strong as before, his prestige and influence are still there. But there is no hurry. If one Yu family falls, thousands of Yu families will fall too. There is still a lot of time, no hurry. The two were very clear about where the biggest obstacle in their plan was. Of course, the difficulties in the future might be greater, but before that, they had to clear these obstacles one by one. Sitting on the grassy slope behind the School of Mathematics, Mingzu crossed her knees and said, "The establishment of the academy is enough to shake the foundations of the aristocratic families. Therefore, these days, the rich and powerful families all over the country have reacted fiercely. Unlike before, they were always a mass of loose sand. Now, they have united and formed a force that can't be ignored. If we don't appease or deal with them, I'm afraid there will be a lot of trouble." Li Yi lay on the lawn, folded his arms, and put them behind his head. He said lazily, "You have already shaken their foundations, and you still don't allow them to resist. Is there still any law in this world?" "Law?" Mingzi glanced at him and said, "I am the law. What about me?" Li Yi closed his eyes and twitched the corner of his mouth. He said, "Everyone is looking for their own interests. If I were one of those big families, I'm afraid I wouldn't quietly wait for my family's foundations to be shaken by you." Mingzu tilted her head to look at him and asked, "Which side are you on?" "Of course I." Li Yi opened his eyes and moved his body to the side to lean against her. He said, "I'm on your side." Smelling the faint fragrance coming from the side, Li Yi closed his eyes again and said, "Since we are united for the sake of profit, we can naturally become scattered again for the sake of profit. Actually, I have already told you about the solution to this matter before." Listening to his words, a strange expression gradually appeared on Her Royal Highness' face. This matter had been bothering her for a long time. Now that she heard his words, she realized that this matter could actually be solved in this way. As long as those big families are no longer united and even suspicious of each other, then they can be divided and defeated one by one. This shouldn't be difficult for you. After Li Yi finished speaking, there was no sound coming from beside him for a long time. He opened his eyes and saw that the eldest princess was looking at him with a strange expression. He had never seen this kind of expression before. He looked at her with a bit of vigilance and asked, "What are you thinking about?" They have discussed this matter for many days and still haven't come up with a solution. Her Royal Highness looked at him and said, "I'm thinking, if you stay in the palace in the future and give me advice, won't I be able to save a lot of trouble?" Li Yi shook his head and said, "External officials can't stay in the palace for a long time. You'd better not think about it." Mingsu looked at him thoughtfully and pretended to be thinking seriously. She said, "External officials can't, but internal officials can." External officials refer to the civil and military officials in the court. Internal officials naturally refer to the officials in the palace, such as the eunuchs who passed edicts and the eunuchs who lived in the palace. Wife? Li Yi suddenly climbed up from the grass and turned pale with fright. "You want to make me empress?" Chapter 8:16. Empress. Mingzu was stunned at first. She didn't understand what he meant, but then she understood. She glanced at him again and said, "I think that Chief Chang's position is more suitable for you." How shameless. How long had she been an empress? She might not have learned anything else, but she learned the cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness of an emperor faster than anyone else. She didn't even look at who was the one who had been racking her brains, working day and night. It was fine if she didn't give her the title of empress, but for her own selfish desires, she actually wanted her to be a eunuch. Putting others aside, what would old man Chang think? He had worked hard all his life, but in the end, he didn't even have the position of Chief Chang. The emperor was heartless, the emperor was heartless. The proud Lolita ran over from the front and asked, Sir, what happened to Her Majesty?" "Her Majesty is fine." Li Yi shook his head and asked, "The class hasn't ended yet. Why did you run over?" "I've already learned the things taught in class. I saw Sir and Royal Sister here, so I ran over." The proud Lolita looked at Li Yi and asked, "Sir, when is Sister going to have a baby?" "Sister?" Li Yi looked at Mingzu. Not Royal Sister." The proud Lolita shook his arm and said, "It's Sister Rui." Li Yi pinched her face and said, "You have to call her mistress." The proud Lolita pouted stubbornly and said, "It's Sister Rui." Up to you, up to you." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "There's less than 2 months left." "Why are you asking?" "I'm just asking." The proud Lolita raised her head and calculated. Then she said with a smile, "Sir, continue talking to Royal Sister. I'm going to play." They were friends, and he had done so much for her behind her back. In the end, she was not even conferred the title of Empress. What else was there to say? Li Yi sat up on the lawn and said, "Wait a moment, I'm leaving too." Okay. The Tsundere Lolita held Li Yi's hand and asked, "Imperial Father said that we're going to eat barbecue in Furong Garden today. Is that true?" A girl's mind was really hard to guess. A few days ago, she was still wearing a white palace dress, looking delicate and reserved, but today, she had returned to her original self. Li Yi sighed, nodded and said, "Yes, but it will be in the afternoon. Let's go fishing first and roast it later." "I'll go get the fishing rod." The Tsundere Lolita nodded excitedly and quickly ran towards a row of houses in front of the academy. As the most tyrannical princess in the imperial palace, she naturally snatched a room that she fancied. Although she didn't usually live there, it was convenient to use it to store things. Ever since His Majesty had suspended court and let the eldest princess act as his representative, most of the officials in court found it difficult to see His Majesty, who spent his days cultivating in Ferong Garden. However, although the court was temporarily suspended, it didn't mean that the emperor didn't care about state affairs at all. Some of the important officials in court had to report to Ferong Garden every few days. If there was a major incident, they had to report it in person. A carriage came from afar and stopped at the gate of Ferong Garden. Tsing Shichen got off the carriage and walked forward a few steps. He cupped his hands to the imperial guard at the gate and said, "Assistant Minister of Revenue, Tsing Shichen, specially reports to His Majesty on the flood of the two provinces and the situation of the court's disaster relief silver. Please help me report this." The imperial guard cupped his hands and said, "His Majesty is busy." "Official Tsing, please come in and wait for a moment." Tsing Shichen was brought into a garden by the imperial guard. He looked up and saw a person in front of him. After a slight pause, he cupped his hands and said, "Official Chen is also here today. Assistant Minister Tseng and Minister of the Imperial Affairs, please wait here for a moment. I will go report to His Majesty." The imperial guard said this and turned to leave. Tsing Shichen walked over. "It's Official Chen's turn to report today." Chen Chong glanced at him. "Why are you here? Did something big happen in the Ministry of Revenue?" "I'm just reporting to His Majesty about the disaster relief silver." The two of them chatted in the small garden. On the other side, Li Yi's grill was almost ready. He looked back and asked, "Your Majesty, is your fish ready? If not, please hurry up. It will take some time to marinate it." The old emperor didn't know why he insisted on killing the fish himself. In the end, after working for a long time, he still hadn't caught the fish that the proud Lolita had caught. He couldn't afford to waste time. If he had known earlier, he would have asked her to put the fish in the small tank at the side. Back in the day, we also personally went into battle to kill enemies. Who would have thought that today, we actually couldn't do anything to a mere fish? Emperor Jing panted slightly as he lay on the rocking chair and said, "Changde, come here." As soon as he finished speaking, Changde had already bent his fingers into claws. He only felt his hand shake, and the fish appeared in Changde's hand. Emperor Jing said with some envy, "You old man, the older you get, the more powerful you are." An imperial guard came forward and reporting to Your Majesty, Minister Qin and Assistant Minister Xing of the Ministry of Revenue are waiting outside. Let them come in. Emperor Jing waved his hand. As if thinking of something, he added, "Changde, bring them here personally." After Changde left, he looked around. Li Yi was setting up the grill while Yongning was passing bricks and tiles. On the other side, Shaning was directing Prince Jean to skewer the meat and vegetables on bamboo sticks. For the time being, no one was paying attention to this side. He quietly got up from the rocking chair and walked to the stone table on the other side. He picked up the wine pot and carefully poured a cup. Just as he brought it to his mouth, a thunderous voice suddenly exploded in his ears. "Shut up!" Emperor Jing's heart trembled, and the wine cup in his hand almost fell. Li Yi walked over with his eyes wide open and grabbed the wine cup from his hand. Emperor Jing glanced at him and explained, "This is grape wine. Grape wine is also wine." "Zhen will just take a sip," Li Yi said resolutely. "Your Majesty, you don't know your own body. Even if it is just a cup of wine, it may cause the disease. A small sip, really just a small sip. I have not drunk wine for more than a year. Not even a sip." Li Yi waved to the back and said, "Shaning, come over and take the wine pot away." The proud Lolita knew that her father could not drink, so no matter how Emperor Jing looked at her, she held the wine pot tightly and did not let go. There was no hope of breaking through from his daughter. Emperor Jing looked at Li Yi and said angrily, "Marquis of Chang and County, Li Yi, Zhen orders you to hand over that bottle of grape wine." Li Yi looked at him and said lightly, if your majesty insists on doing this, then don't blame me for disrespecting the imperial decree." The two looked at each other and neither retreated. A little further away, Tsing Shichen and Chen Chong stood there in a daze, not daring to breathe. Forget it, forget it. If you don't want to drink, then don't drink. Chen has drunk all kinds of wine. Isn't it just a cup of grape wine? Chen doesn't care. After a while, Emperor Jing reluctantly looked at the grape wine in Shaning's arms and lay back on the rocking chair. He pointed to Chen Chong and Tsing Shichen standing there and said, "You two, come over and talk." Tsing Shichen glanced at the busy Li Yi out of the corner of his eye and walked over. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, this is the information that the Ministry of Revenue has compiled about the use of the disaster relief silver. Please have a look." When Tsing Shichen spoke, Chen Chong, who was standing quietly to the side, tilted his head slightly and looked in that direction. The scene just now still remained in his mind. At this moment, a certain thought in his heart wavered again. Chapter 8:17. Lord Chen, Lord Tsing, aren't you going to have a skewer? Li Yi held 2 skewers of chicken wings in his hand and waved his hand when Chen Chong and Tsing Shichen walked past him. How could I trouble County Marquis Li to cook personally? Please excuse me. Even though they had swallowed a lot of saliva because of the smell of meat when they were reporting to His Majesty, Tsing Shichen and Chen Chong still cupped their fists in fear and left quickly. What a joke! His Majesty had just asked for a skewer of chicken wings and was refused by him. What would His Majesty think if the two of them dared to reach out now? Hypocrites! Li Yi glanced at the two who were running away. What did they mean by, "I wouldn't dare to trouble you"? They made it sound as if they had never troubled you before. One said in front of him, another said in front of the old emperor. I won't give it to them. Come, one for each of you. Completely ignoring the old emperor's gaze in the distance, Li Yi gave 2 skewers of chicken wings to Yong Ning and the proud Lolita. Thank you, sir. The Tsundra Lolita said reservedly and kissed him lightly on the cheek. Li Yi had already put the other 2 skewers on the fire. Seeing this, he turned his head to the side and said, Hey, I just ate something and my mouth is full of oil, let me wipe it for you. The proud Lolita took out a small handkerchief and ran over to wipe it. Then she quickly ran back, humph. Emperor Jing, who was lying on the rocking chair, made a strong nasal sound. Then he turned his head, peeled a grape and threw it into his mouth. He murmured, Strange, really strange. Why is it strange, Your Majesty? Changde lowered his head and asked. Emperor Jing was surprised and said, Chen Chong is capable, but he usually stands firmly on the side of the King of Shu and the Chui family. When it comes to matters that are disadvantageous to them, he always avoids the important and focuses on the trivial. What is going on today? The aristocratic families are causing trouble everywhere, and I am afraid that the Chui family is adding fuel to the fire. Today, he is unexpectedly so fair and impartial, without the slightest bit of bias. As an important official of the imperial court, it is my duty to uphold justice and not be biased. Why does Your Majesty say this? Emperor Jing snorted coldly and said, I'm afraid that most people in the imperial court do not think as clearly as you. After peeling another grape, he said, speaking of which, these aristocratic clans have joined forces to rebel this time. The establishment of the academy has encountered great local obstacles. The capital is too far away, so the government decrees have been weakened. Go and call Li Yi over. Li Yi handed over the responsibility of barbecuing to Li Han. He then washed his hands and walked over. Seeing that Jing Emperor was eating grapes one by one, he nodded and said, Grape wine and grape, there is only a difference of one word, but there is not much difference. Your Majesty should not drink wine, so it is good to eat more grapes. After he finished speaking, he reached out and took the grapes that Jing Di threw over. Needless to say, these tribute grapes were indeed much sweeter than those outside. Emperor Jing looked at him and asked, the aristocratic families are now united. You want Mingzu to edit the clan records. According to this method, the status of all the old aristocratic families will be different. Won't it cause a greater backlash? I did not say all of them. Li Yi ate another grape and said, for example, the Zhang family of Pingyang, the Wei family of Yunzhou, the Go family of Tongzhou. He named a few names. These are all good and innocent families. Of course, they should be treated differently. The Zhang family of Pingyang, the Wei family of Yunzhou, the Go family of Tongzhou. Jing Di frowned and asked, where are these people? Before he finished speaking, he closed his mouth again. His face showed a thoughtful expression. After a moment, he nodded and said, yes, these are all good and innocent families. The imperial court must give them special preferential treatment. Even if no one in their family is an official in the imperial court, their position in the clan records must be slightly raised. Go and continue with your work. Leave 2 strings of wings for me. Jing Di waved his hand and turned back to order. Come, squeeze these grapes into juice for me. Outside Hibiscus Garden, Chen Chong and Xing Shichen did not separate but got on the same carriage. Chen Chong frowned and said, Your Majesty just said that you want to recompile the clan records. I don't know what kind of storm it will cause. Xing Shichen shook his head. This is no small matter. Once the clan records is recompiled, in the future, the selection of officials in the imperial court, the marriages between the aristocratic families, and the prestige of the aristocratic families among the people will all change. It can be said that it will fundamentally affect the status of the aristocratic families. It will not be easy for Your Majesty to suppress the old aristocratic families. Recently, the Chui family has been instigating in the background. Those people finally can't sit still anymore. Chen Chong looked outside and said, Your Majesty's determination to build an academy and support the commoner families is so strong. It is reasonable to suppress them. However, in the past few decades, these old aristocratic families have become unprecedentedly united. I'm afraid that His Majesty's move won't go smoothly. Moreover, their reputation among the people is so high that it can't be destroyed by a single clan records. It's still unknown whether or not it will be recognized by the people after it is recompiled. Xing Shichen shook his head and said, In terms of prestige, can they compare to the eldest princess? Right now, Her Highness is in charge. If she carries it out, who among the people will object? Chen Chong was instantly speechless. In the past 2 years, the eldest princess had really done too many great things for the benefit of the country and the people. If not for this, His Majesty would not have abandoned all the princes and made her the acting regent. It was precisely because the decrees she carried out were very close to the people's lives that in terms of prestige and reputation among the people, even His Majesty could not compare to Her Highness. Because of the princess, the people who had changed the plight of their families even saw her as a living bodhisattva and had set up a longevity tablet for her in their homes. Chen Chong suddenly thought of something and asked, Say, what do you think that Li Yi is thinking? Xing Shichen looked at him and asked, What do you mean? You saw it just now. His imperial favor is unprecedented. What relationship does he have with His Majesty? Deep confusion appeared on Chen Chong's face. With his ability and influence, no matter which prince he chooses to support, the chances of the king of Shu ascending to the throne are extremely slim. However, he did not agree to any of the prince's solicitations. Instead, he has always supported Her Highness the eldest princess. Seeing Chen Chong nod, Xing Shichen thought for a moment, then said, Perhaps he himself has realized that no matter what position he holds in His Majesty's heart, if he participates in the struggle for the throne, he will definitely incur His Majesty's displeasure. Through this method, he is expressing his attitude and stance. Chen Chong frowned. You mean to say that by not helping either side, he is indirectly expressing to His Majesty that he will not participate in the struggle for the throne? What else? Xing Shichen looked at him and asked, does Lord Chen think that he wants to support an empress? This, of course not. Chen Chong shook his head. However, compared to the last time he had answered this question, he hesitated for a moment longer. Absurd, absurd. The clan records uses genealogical traditions to determine the ranks of the clans. How can it be so easily changed? Duke Zhang, don't be agitated, don't be agitated. A middle-aged man supported the furious elder and said, the court's actions have disregarded etiquette and subverted tradition. It will definitely not be recognized by the world. Duke Zhang, don't worry. The elder looked at him and said disdainfully, of course you don't have to worry. Your Jing clan still has people who are officials in the court. Even if they have really been demoted, it won't be much. My Pingyang Zhang clan has been demoted by 2 whole ranks. Hearing this, the middle-aged man thought for a moment and said no more. This elder of the Pingyang Zhang clan was right. The Jing clan was not like the Zhang family. The Jing clan still had people who were officials in the court. Even if the clan records were rearranged, the position of the Jing clan would not change too much. As for the Zhang family that had no one in the court, who cared? Preposterous, preposterous. If this is the case, how can there be any etiquette? Another person angrily slammed the table. The person beside him also had a gloomy expression. The division of clans has existed since ancient times. How can it be changed so easily? Like the Pingyang Zhang clan, the Wei clan of Yunzhou and the Go clan of Tongzhou were also the 2 clans that had suffered the most in the editing of the clan records. After Wei Fong and Go Su finished speaking, the hall became even more rowdy. However, it was impossible to know what everyone was thinking in their hearts. Although there were many clans like the Zhang clan, the Wei clan, and the Go clan that had suffered in this incident, there were also some clans that, due to various reasons, not only did their status not suffer, they even improved. In the future, their prestige and fame would probably be even greater. This was a good thing. After expressing deep sympathy for the Zhang clan, the Wei clan, and the other clans, when they returned to their clans, they still had to celebrate. Chapter 8:18. The matter of revising the clan records had been announced for a long time. Naturally, it wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time if they wanted to rearrange all the noble clans of the Jing kingdom. However, the revision this time was not to completely overturn the original rankings. Instead, it was to make some changes to the original foundation. The grand scholars from the Ministry of Rites and the Hongwen Library were overseeing the revision. Within half a month, they had almost completed it. A person hurried in from outside and placed a booklet on the table. He said, "This is the first draft that I brought from the Ministry of Rites. Everyone, take a look at it as soon as possible. You must return it by today. I want to see how they will rank the clan records." The old man surnamed Zhang snorted coldly and picked up the booklet. If the Pingyang Zhang clan were to follow the rankings announced to the public, they would be demoted by 2 ranks. This would be a great humiliation to the entire clan. In the future, how would the name of the Pingyang Zhang clan be trusted by others? However, when he picked up the booklet and flipped through it, his beard trembled, and he put it down again. "I still have some matters to attend to today. I'll take my leave first." Seeing the old man surnamed Zhang put down the booklet and immediately turned to leave, the crowd was not surprised at all. The Pingyang Zhang clan had suffered a heavy loss this time. After seeing the results, they were already extremely angry and did not want to stay here any longer. "Let me see." Wei Fong and Go Su, who were the closest to the booklet, went over and flipped through 2 pages with sullen expressions. After seeing their clan's name, they looked at each other and were stunned. The representative of the Yunzhou Wei clan closed the booklet, pursed his lips, and coughed lightly. "I suddenly remembered that I have some matters to attend to at home. I'll take my leave first." The man named Go Su, who represented the Tongzhou Go clan, chased after him. "Brother Wei, don't worry. I'll go with you." Someone flipped through the booklet doubtfully and murmured, "What's wrong with these three people? Even if they're really ranked at the bottom, aren't there so many people who have suffered the same fate as them?" Not long after the words left his mouth, he stopped abruptly. The Pingyang Zhang clan, the Yunzhou Wei clan, the Tongzhou Go clan, the rankings of these three clans were not as low as they had expected. Instead, they were higher than the clans of most of the people present. Not only that, but the rankings of several other clans had also exceeded their expectations. What's going on? The Zhang clan, the Wei clan, and the Go clan, could it be that they've already sided with? That's impossible. Didn't you see what they looked like just now? Then how do you explain this? No one could explain it, and no one could understand why these families, who were clearly in the same situation as them, were given preferential treatment in this matter. Why did they do so? Although this ranking did not determine the rise and fall of the aristocratic families, the impact on them could not be ignored. If the new clan records was accepted by the world, would their families still be able to maintain the same respected status as before? While many people were guessing in their hearts, they also looked at some of the people around them with a bit of scrutiny. On the surface, he seemed to be on the same boat as them, but who knew what he had done behind their backs? Otherwise, why would there be such an unfair outcome? Who knew how many of them were like Madame Zhang, Madame Wei, and Madame Go, doing one thing on the surface and another behind their backs? Someone frowned and said, "Perhaps the imperial court did this on purpose." On purpose? Someone sneered, "Why did they choose them?" Looking at the expressions of the people around them, they found that it was completely different from when they entered the door. As soon as the old man surnamed Zhang returned home, a man came out to greet him and asked anxiously, "Father, how did it go?" The old man surnamed Zhang glanced at him and said, "What do you mean how?" The man said anxiously, "The clan records, our Zhang family." The old man surnamed Zhang waved his hand and said, "Go and make arrangements for the big banquet in the mansion tonight. Ask them all to come back. No one is missing." "Ah." The man looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Oh yes." The old man surnamed Zhang thought of something and waved his hand and said, "The land that the academy uses in Pingyang, donate it all, donate it." The man was shocked and asked, "Father, haven't we discussed it with those people? We won't give in on this matter, what do you know?" The old man surnamed Zhang glared at him and said, "I said I'll donate it. Don't ask anything else. Go and do your work." The old man surnamed Zhang strode away. The young man stood there in a daze for a long time before he turned around and left with a heavy heart. At the same time, in another mansion in the capital, Wei Fang, who had just returned, ordered the housekeeper, "Quick, send a letter to Yunzhou immediately. Tell them that the Wei family's ranking in the clan records has risen to the 3rd level. Tell them not to make things difficult for the people who are building the academy in the capital and to help them more. Those who disobey will be punished according to the family rules." Not far away from the Wei family, the person in charge of the Go family in the capital of Tongzhou was also ordering his subordinates. "Don't rest on the way. Go to Tongzhou overnight and tell those rich merchants to donate as much as they can. If anyone disgraces the Go family in Tongzhou, don't blame me for being impolite." Within a day, news of the same content had spread from the capital several times. The Zhang family, the Wei family. These people, what are they doing? The head of the Chui family, Chui Qing's face was gloomy. This matter can only be done if everyone is united. If someone is lax, what others do will be seen by the world. In contrast, won't they be reviled by thousands of people? Chui Qinghe, the second in command of the Chui family, shook his head and said, "It's not just a matter of the Zhang family and the Wei family. This time, the revision of the clan records, His Majesty's attitude is completely unpredictable. At this time, the final ranking has not been decided, and the big families are suspicious of each other. Some people have even taken the initiative to express goodwill to the imperial court. This time, it's our negligence. This is the simplest trick to sow discord. I don't believe that they can't see through it. Will it work? The eldest princess looked at Li Yi and asked with a frown. So what if they see through it? So what if they can't see through it? Li Yi took out a small bamboo basket from the kitchen, took out a washed apple, and handed it to Yongning. Xiaoning, Xiaohuan, Duanwu, come and eat an apple. Xiaohuan was playing with the two girls in the yard. Li Yi waved to them and gave each of them an apple. The apple sent by the Wang family had thin skin and thick flesh. It was sweet and delicious. The taste was very good. He took out the last apple from the basket and took a bite. Only then did he see the eldest princess raise her hand and hand it over. He asked in surprise, "Do you want it too?" "No." Mingzi glared at him, slightly angry in her heart. "You see, the principle is the same. Xiaohuan and the others can eat the apple, but you can't, so you're unhappy. Because what they can't eat is not only the apple." Li Yi looked at her, divided the apple into two, and handed her the unbidden half. He said, "So, the reason is not important, the process is not important, the result is important." Mingzi took a bite of the apple and thought about it. Li Yi held the half of the apple in his hand and looked at it over and over again. He didn't find the bite mark. He raised his head and said embarrassedly, "Sorry, I gave it to the wrong person, can you?" He found that the half of the apple in her hand already had a bite mark. He waved his hand and said with some disdain, forget it, I don't want it." Chapter 8:19. Let me tell you, when it comes to apples, the Wang families are the best. Li Yi nibbled on the apple with 2 bites missing, handed over a letter, and said, "The Zhang family of Pingyang, the Go family of Tongzhou, the Wei family of Yunzhou. These families have already sent back fast horses. This time, the imperial court has given them enough preferential treatment. I think they should know what to do. As for the others, there's nothing to worry about. The Zhang clan and the Wei clan have a very delicate position among the major clans. Without them, they won't be able to hold their own. If they continue to persist in going about things the wrong way, they won't be able to withstand the public opinion of the people with those clans in the lead." Li Mingzhu looked at him. After thinking for a moment, she said seriously, "You really don't want to think about entering the palace? Power, wealth, glory, splendor. I can give you whatever you want. I won't consider it." Li Yi shook his head firmly. Power, wealth, glory. He had none of them now. This invitation was not sincere at all, and there was no need to consider it at all. The princess took a bite of the apple and said, "I don't know what they will do next. No matter what they will do, just take it." Li Yi threw away half of the apple core, clapped his hands, and said, "It's good that they will do something. If they are all quiet, I don't know where to start." Whether it was the Yu family's difficulties, the chaos of the aristocratic families, or all the previous events, in most cases, it started with the other party seeking death. If he really wanted to take the initiative to design and target, it would be a waste of time and energy. It would not be as simple and convenient as it was now. However, after suffering so many losses in a row, the king of Shu was still holed up in Shuzhou, and they had also suffered a lot in the capital city or other places. Thinking about it, they should be stable for a while. Ruya was about to give birth, and Li Yi did not want to trouble himself in other places. If they could let him spend the new year in peace, should he be more lenient in the coming year? The head of the Cui family, Cui Qingze, put down a letter and said, "There's news from the palace. Her ladyship said that in the next few months, it's better to stay quiet and not move. We only need to pay more attention to the eldest princess." Everyone has seen the eldest princess's performance in court recently. She is even more cautious than His Majesty when it comes to handling political affairs. Someone frowned and said, besides, none of the people she transferred from the various departments are simple people. Isn't waiting for the princess to make a mistake the most inferior method? How could Cui Qingze not know that this was the most inferior method? However, the more they moved, the greater the loss. In less than a month, the Yu family was gone. The aristocratic families that had united with great difficulty also became distracted and had different thoughts because of a broken book. The eldest princess, or County Marquis Li, dealt with every move accurately and ruthlessly. How could they dare to make another move? Without absolute confidence, he didn't dare to make any rash moves. After careful calculation, he didn't dare to calculate how much power the King of Shu's faction had lost in the past 2 years. There was no fight for the throne, and there were no factions attacking each other. How could the situation become like this? After careful consideration in the past few days, he didn't have full confidence in something for the first time. In short, we need to be more stable these days. We also need to restrain the children in the family. Don't let anyone get hold of us. Cui Qingze stood up and waved his hand in annoyance. Let's call it a day. As the head of the Cui family spoke, everyone in the hall stood up and took their leave. When walking out of the Cui mansion, Qing Shichen paused and said, Brother Qin, are you going to Willow Lane today? Same way. Chen Chong stepped out of the gate of the Cui mansion and nodded slightly. Watching the two figures go away, someone finally couldn't help asking in confusion, when did the Xing family and the Qin family become so close? I've never heard of any other contact between the two families. It's really strange. Everyone was puzzled, but they didn't pay too much attention to it. After all, the two families belonged to the King of Shu's faction. Even if there really was some unusual contact, it wasn't something inexplicable. It was still the tea house in Willow Lane. Qing Shichen took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and handed it to Qin Chong. I've organized this. It's a summary of all the major and minor events that have happened in the court in the past 2 years, as well as the gains and losses of the King of Shu's faction. Brother Qin, why don't you take a look? Qin Chong glanced at him before looking at the paper in his hand. The Cui family's decades of planning in the court has been mostly destroyed in the past 2 years. The King of Shu's current advantage is that he is the eldest son of imperial concubine Cui. He only has this identity as the eldest son of the emperor. Qing Shichen's gaze wavered. Unfortunately, everyone, including the Cui family and imperial concubine Cui, has been blinded by this identity. They seem to have forgotten that the one who ultimately decides this matter is His Majesty. His Majesty's attitude towards the King of Shu is really not the same as how he treats the eldest son of the emperor. Although His Highness's actions were too muddle-headed, he has already been sent to Shuzhou for a year. His Majesty's body is unwell, and he would rather choose the eldest princess than summon His Highness back. I really can't understand. Gains and losses. Chen Chong put down the paper, the corners of his mouth twitching. I'm afraid there are only losses and no gains. Li Yi escorted 3rd Miss Qin out of the courtyard and said, there's still about a month left. The imperial physician will take her pulse every few days. Yesterday, I invited Master Tan Yin over to take a look. Everything is fine. You don't have to worry. These days, he rarely came here, but every time he did, he would run into her. That's good. 3rd Miss Qin nodded with a smile. Seeing the figure at the entrance of the alley, she said, it's getting late. I'm going back. Seeing Qin Chong leave with her, Li Yi turned his gaze to Qing Shichen, who was standing to the side. The last time I saw Minister Qin, he said that the Ministry of Revenue was very busy, and Her Highness had sent another person away, so he was a bit busy. Li Yi looked at him and said doubtfully, Assistant Minister Xing seems to be in such a good mood every day. It doesn't look like he's very busy. Tsing Shichen smiled and didn't mind. He said, this time, I'm specially waiting for County Marquis Li waiting for me. Li Yi looked at him in surprise. Tsing Shichen looked at him and stretched out his hand to the side. He said, I wonder if County Marquis Li can come to the tea house for a chat. The Xing family was firmly on the side of the king of Shu. Although they weren't mortal enemies, they were definitely not friends. If he had to link it to something, it would be because he ate her dumplings without paying. The dumplings made by the Marquis of Chang and couldn't be compared with a cup of tea, right? Although the price of this cup of tea wasn't low, this tea house was opened by his family. Although it was expensive, it was only for style. As for the cost, it was not worth mentioning to others. Chapter 820. Does County Marquis Li know what drunk Mo likes to eat the most? After the two of them sat down, Tsing Shichen didn't directly say what he wanted to talk to Li Yi, but asked a question without any rhyme or reason. Fish. Li Yi picked up the teacup and said without hesitation. Tsing Shichen didn't show a surprised expression on his face, and asked again, then does County Marquis Li know what she doesn't like to eat the most? Li Yi took a sip of tea, glanced at him, and said, it's also fish. Before Tsing Shichen asked, he explained, she likes to eat fish, but when she was a child, she was stuck by a fishbone. Every time she eats it, she will carefully pick out the fishbone. She thinks it's very troublesome, so she likes to eat fish very much, but she doesn't eat it often. A strange expression flashed across Tsing Shichen's face. He pursed his lips and asked again, then do you know what color of clothes drunk Mo likes to wear the most? Li Yi glanced at him and said, you must think that I won't say white, because she doesn't usually wear white clothes, but in fact, she likes white. She just thinks it's easy to get dirty when wearing white clothes to paint, so she's too lazy to wear it. Tsing Shichen coughed to cover up his embarrassment, because he did think so in his heart. These habits of hers were cultivated since childhood. If it wasn't someone very close to her, it would be impossible to know. Li Yi took a sip of tea and added, in fact, not only white, she also likes pink, purple. Tsing Shichen looked at him and asked, why don't I know? Of course you don't know. Li Yi glanced at him disdainfully. If this assistant minister Xing even knew this, did he think he could still sit here and talk to him now? Seeing that Tsing Shichen seemed to be about to speak again, Li Yi waved his hand and said, she likes to eat fish, and her favorite color is white. She likes to eat dumplings with lotus vegetable filling. She likes to paint, especially landscapes and three-dimensional paintings. She likes to eat osmanthus cake. She is best at playing the zither. She likes me the most, and she is most afraid of thunder and the dark. Her birthday is June 7th, and 90, 63, 91, 34 C. At this point, Li Yi didn't plan to continue. Although he could still say a lot, it wasn't convenient to tell an outsider about the small mole above her left chest. As Tsing Shichen listened to him speak one by one, the teacup in his hand hung in the air. After a moment, he sighed and added, there are some things that Nan Nan didn't tell you. She also likes to eat Su Ji's candied plums. It's on Dong Street, but now it's been renamed to Fu Ji. Also, Nan Nan. Li Yi was startled and asked, who is Nan Nan? Tsing Shichen glanced at him and said, little darling is Drunken Mo's nickname. Don't you know? Nan Nan. Continue. She only said a few things about her past. Hearing this, Li Yi immediately became spirited. It seemed that this assistant minister Xing wasn't completely useless after all. Just as Tsing Shichen opened his mouth, he thought of another thing and said in surprise, 90, 63, 91, 34. What is this? This is her favorite number. Li Yi waved his hand and said, this is not important. Continue. what other interesting things about her when she was a child? Seeing the extremely interested expression on his face, Tsing Shichen calmed down and took a sip of tea before looking at him and slowly said, County Marquis Li is a young hero and has a great influence in the court. He is also highly regarded by His Majesty and was given the title of Minister of Honor. Now that His Majesty is ill, the Eastern Palace can't be without a ruler for a long time. I wonder which of the princes in the court is most suitable to enter the Eastern Palace. Whether the Eastern Palace belongs to the Eastern Palace or not, what does it have to do with us? Li Yi shook his head and said, Lord Tsing, tell me about drunken Imo, about Nan Nan. Tsing Shichen shook his head and said, County Marquis Li, you are wrong. As an official, we should share the Emperor's worries. This matter concerns the future of the country. How can you say it has nothing to do with us? This matter should be decided by His Majesty alone. As an official, you should know your place and don't say too much. His Majesty has always been wise and listens to my opinion. This matter, the King of Shu definitely has no chance. Don't waste your time. Let's talk about serious matters. What other interesting things did Nan Nan do when she was a child? Tsing Shichen's hand holding the teacup trembled and he didn't wipe the tea that fell on his hand. He looked up at Li Yi and asked, What do you mean by this, County Marquis Li? What do you mean by wasting your time? Li Yi knocked on the table and looked at him with a frown, saying, Lord Tsing, I came here with you to talk about serious matters. If you continue to use these messy things to change the topic, I will leave. Saying this, he picked up the cup of tea in his hand. Messy things. Tsing Shichen murmured. The appointment of the Eastern Palace was related to the rise and fall of the country. If he had said this in the court, he would have been drowned by the spittle of all the officials in the court. However, at this time, he couldn't care about this. Who could imagine that the Chui family, the prominent Chui family 2 years ago, the King of Shu who was like the sun at noon in the court, would end up like this in just 2 years? Since the King of Shu had no chance, don't waste your time. Sure enough, the things that happened in the past 2 years were not unintentional. Was this his attitude? In this case, he should have a lot of backup plans. Tsing Shichen looked solemn. Although he knew he shouldn't ask this question, he couldn't help but ask, May I ask? County Marquis Li, who do you think is more suitable to sit in the Eastern Palace? Clang! Li Yi put the teacup heavily on the table, looked at Tsing Shichen and said lightly, Lord Tsing, you are off the topic. Tsing Shichen stared at him for a long time, nodded and said, Nan Nan. Nan Nan didn't tell you these things. Li Yi glanced at him and said, How could she tell me? Since Nan Nan didn't tell you. Tsing Shichen smiled and said, Then I can't tell you, Pa. Li Yi slapped the table and said angrily, Surname Tsing, you fool me. Tsing Shichen cupped his hands and said, Thank you for doing me a favor today, County Marquis Li. Li Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at him, asking, Recently, the Ministry of Revenue should have some old accounts to settle, right? Tsing Shichen didn't know why he brought up this matter, nodded and said, This matter is indeed my responsibility. Since it is Assistant Minister Zhang's responsibility, then it is easy. Li Yi nodded and said, This account has been urgently pressed by the Imperial Court. It has already been a few days, but there has been no movement at all. Assistant Minister Zhang still has the free time to drink tea here and slack off. If there is no result before tomorrow, it is not too much to hit you, the person in charge, with dozens of planks, right? Tsing Shichen smiled and said, County Marquis Li can manage the academy, but can you manage our Ministry of Revenue? Can't manage. After smiling, Li Yi didn't say anything else and directly turned to leave. Seeing the smile on Li Yi's face, Tsing Shichen finally realized something. His heart shook and he immediately said, Wait, County Marquis Li, wait. He hurried downstairs and didn't see Li Yi, but was stopped by the tea house waiter. Customer, you haven't paid the bill. Tsing Shichen hurriedly took out his money bag and asked, How much? The waiter chuckled and said, 100 taels of silver. Tsing Shichen had already taken out a few pieces of silver. Hearing this, he raised his head and looked at the waiter in disbelief, asking, "What?" This official only wanted a pot of tea, and it cost 100 taels of silver. Although the Tsing clan was considered a wealthy clan, they weren't so extravagant as to charge 100 taels of silver for a cup of tea. Under normal circumstances, this was the entire clan's monthly expenses. No. That pot of tea only costs 1 tael of silver. The waiter shook his head and said, "But young Master Li said that an inch of time is an inch of gold. You've wasted a lot of his time. Seeing that we're acquaintances, the friendship price is 99 taels. Chapter 8:21. You dare to charge 100 taels of silver for a pot of tea. Did County Marquis Li forget that I am also an assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue? Of course, he didn't have 100 taels of silver. Tsing Shichen threw the money bag to the waiter and hurried out. He looked at the figure in front of him and snorted coldly. Li Yi turned his head and asked, "So what if you are an assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue? Can an assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue leave early all day, slack off, and drink tea without paying?" Tsing Shichen looked back and said, "If I pursue this matter, this tea house will not be open tomorrow." That's good. I don't need to be merciful. Master Tseng, remember to wear thicker clothes tomorrow. I don't know how your body is. Can you still threaten me like today after being flogged a few hundred times? Li Yi smiled indifferently and turned to walk into the yard. Wait. Tsing Shichen's expression changed. He quickly walked up and stood still. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I still have a few words to say to Master Li." Li Yi waved his hand. No hurry. I will go in and say a few words. You stay here and don't move. If you have anything to say, wait until I come out. Hey, Li, why are you back again? Xiao Chui squatted in the corridor and rubbed a small dudu in the wooden basin. Seeing Li Yi come in, she hurriedly hid the wooden basin behind her and raised her head to ask. Li Yi glanced around nonchalantly and asked, "Where is your young lady?" "Young lady is in the studio." She quickly replied and moved her body to protect the wooden basin behind her. Watching Li Yi walk in, she picked up the wooden basin and ran to the back of the house like a gust of wind. Inside the studio, Xing Zumo was bending over the table to paint. At this time, she was painting a key part. Hearing the noise at the door, she didn't look up and said, "Xiao Chui, you are done washing. Help me massage my waist." Li Yi was a little surprised. Although some things had been said, the current relationship between the two was still very pure. Other than the accidental holding of hands, hugging, kissing, seeing her change her clothes, showering, there didn't seem to be anything else, right? To be honest, they hadn't even held hands under normal circumstances. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and come over. I've been standing here for so long. I'm so sore. Li Yi nodded in a daze. He slowly walked over, stood behind her, and placed his hands on her waist. She had a strong foundation in dancing since she was young. She would also deliberately do some plastic exercises, so the tightness and delicacy of her slender waist could be felt through her clothes. Li Yi was only absent-minded for a moment before he focused his mind and started massaging. She usually painted standing up. After a long time, parts like her waist and shoulders would be very uncomfortable. After this busy period, he should teach her some basic martial arts. He didn't expect her to become as powerful as Mississippi Lu and the Princess Royal. It would be good enough if she could strengthen her body. Xiao Chui, you have made great progress these days. Your technique is also different from before. Where did you learn it? Xing Zumo finally finished this part. She put down the brush and looked over. No, it's not 63. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "Did you not eat well recently? How did you lose weight again?" Ah! Goddess Luo Shui was like a frightened rabbit. Her body trembled, and she immediately jumped away. She said with a red face, "Why is it you?" "Xiao Chui is washing her underwear outside, so I came in by myself," Li Yi explained. He glanced at the painting on the table and said in surprise, "Who is this painting? He is so handsome and elegant." Xing Zumo glanced at him and said angrily, "Bah, shameless. How can you say that about yourself?" Li Yi frowned and said, "But Nan, you didn't handle it well here, where?" Speaking of the painting, she became serious. She walked over again and looked at the painting on the table. However, the next moment, she raised her head and looked at him in disbelief. She asked, What did you just say?" Li Yi pointed to the painting on the table and said, "I said that you didn't handle it well here." She looked at Li Yi in confusion, thinking that she had heard wrong. She lowered her head again and asked, "What's wrong?" Here should be more angular to match the handsome." Li Yi pointed to a certain outline of the person's face in the painting, then shook his head and said, "But this is not a problem with your painting skills. After all, Nan, you are best at landscape painting, you." "How did you know?" Xing Zumo took a few steps back and looked at him with a blushing face. She had long forgotten about the problem of painting skills. This was her pet name. To be precise, it should be a baby name. As far as she could remember, there were only 2 or 3 people who called her by this name, except for her parents. Li Yi asked in surprise, "What, Nan? Don't say it. What's wrong with Nan? Don't call me that. Why, Nan. It sounds nice." "Ah, Xiao Chui, come quickly, help me shut his mouth." Seeing Li Yi coming out of the yard, Xing Shichen, who was standing in place, asked in surprise, "County Marquis Li, what happened to your face?" "Nothing. If you have anything to say, say it now." Xiao Chui, that silly girl, didn't know how to behave properly when she was playing. She made threatening gestures and pushed him down on the bed. The 2 of them were weak, and he couldn't really fight with them. As a result, his face was rubbed red and smeared with a little paint. It took a long time to wash it clean. When Xing Shichen walked out of the alley side by side with him, he stopped and turned to look at him, asking, "You? How far have you gone?" Li Yi knew what he was asking. He looked at him and didn't speak. "It seems that I asked too much." A hint of understanding appeared on Xing Shichen's face. After shaking his head, he said solemnly, "Zumo has suffered a lot in the past 10 years. It wasn't easy for her to get to where she is today. Treat her well and don't let her suffer again in the future." "I will definitely treat her well and not let her suffer again. There is no need to wait until the future." Li Yi glanced at Xing Shichen and said, "On the contrary, Assistant Minister Zhang and your Xing family, please don't do anything unnecessary. The great change that the Xing family suffered more than 10 years ago was still a scar in her heart that couldn't be easily opened." Even Li Yi didn't dare to mention those things easily. Although the Xing family was small, it had a great impact on her. Xing Shichen looked up at him and said, "County Marquis Li, don't forget that Zumo's surname is Zhang. She is a member of our Xing family. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for you to say this. That was in the past." Li Yi looked at him calmly. "It won't be in the future, you." Xing Shichen's face showed anger, but Li Yi didn't look at him again and turned to leave. Watching him get on the carriage, Xing Shichen stood there for a long time. At a certain moment, the anger on his face disappeared, and a faint smile gradually crept up. "In this way, I can rest assured," he murmured and turned to leave. The smile on his face disappeared, and he seemed to be in deep thought. "King of Shu, what a waste of effort." In the carriage, Fong tilted his head and looked at him. "Young master, are we going home?" Yes. Li Yi thought for a moment and said, let's go to Dong Street first. Go to Dong Street. The sloppy old man opened his eyes and asked, why do we go to Dong Street? From here, we almost have to go around half of the capital. I told you to go, so go. Why do you talk so much nonsense? Fang shook the reins, glanced at him, and said in a bad mood. Coming out of Fuji, Fang's mouth was full, but he didn't forget to praise, young master, the candied fruits of Fuji taste really good. The sloppy old man threw a piece of dried fruit into his mouth and nodded. Fuji's candied fruits and pastries are famous in the capital. More than 10 years ago, it should be called Suji, Fuji. Why don't we call it Su Fuji from now on? Li Yi carried the box full of candied fruits and pastries into the carriage. He turned back and pointed to the shop on the side, and said to Fang, buy it. Chapter 8:22. Xiao Huan held a big box of candied plums and asked, young master, do you want to give some of these candied plums to Miss? Li Yi thought for a moment and shook his head, forget it. Miss likes to eat sour food now and doesn't like sweet food. Let's talk about it later. The little maid nodded, blinked her eyes and asked, what about second Miss? Li Yi waved a paper bag in his hand and said, I'll send it to second Mississippi. You can ask someone to put it in the freezer first. Speaking of which, he had been back for a while, but he didn't see Mississippi Lu practicing outside. She should be in her room. Li Yi carried the paper bag with the candied pastries and walked to the door of her room. The door wasn't closed, so he pushed it open gently. He looked into the room and said, I bought some candied plums on my way back. Do you want to? Mississippi Lu was really in her room, sitting on a small stool. In front of her was a wooden basin with water and Li Yi felt very strange. Could it be that today was really a special day? Was there any ceremony or custom for women to choose to wash their underwear on this day? Mississippi Lu looked up at him, and Li Yi looked down at her and the wooden basin. It was pink and embroidered with lotus flowers. If I say that I didn't do it on purpose, would you believe me? Li Yi asked with a sincere face. Mississippi Lu took the pink belly band out of the wooden basin and hung it in the room. Then she asked, what's the matter? Li Yi raised his hand and gestured to the paper bag in his hand. The candied plums of Fuji are very delicious. Do you want to try it? Put it there. Mississippi Lu said lightly. After glancing at him, she walked over and stared at his neck. Li Yi's heart inexplicably tightened and asked, what are you looking at? Mississippi Lu looked up at him, what do you think? Don't tell me there's another lipstick. Li Yi couldn't see what was on her neck. Even if there was, Fang should have reminded him just now. However, looking at her expression, he still said with some uncertainty, I remember that I washed it many times just now. It should be nothing, don't worry, there are no lipstick marks. Mississippi Lu shook her head and reached out to help him tidy up his collar. Then she looked up and asked, why are you washing your neck for no reason? Li Yi looked around and murmured, even if it's for no reason, I still have to pay attention to my hygiene. There's no law in the Jing kingdom that forbids washing one's neck for no reason. Oh, by the way, your lip gloss looks good today. Where can I buy it? Hey, ears, don't twist your ears. Fuji had become Su Fuji. This process was not complicated at all. For the currently family, anything that could be solved with money would not be complicated at all. Li Yi sat in the yard eating the free candied plums. His ears were still aching, but he always felt that Mississippi Lu had become much gentler recently. Although he was influenced by the company he kept with Rui for a long time, it was normal for the female Tyrannosaurus to become a little sheep. However, the effects of the influence of the past 10 years were not reflected in just a few months. Compared to drawing out her sword at the slightest disagreement, twisting ears was already considered very gentle. As for the sudden gentleness of Mississippi Lou, he actually felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Then, he felt that it was a little cheap. Could it be that he had subconscious tendencies of being a masochist? Then, he felt that he was thinking too much. After all, he didn't always provoke her for no reason. Looking at Mississippi Lou, who was practicing swordsmanship at the side, he considered a certain question for a long time. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Rui, do you think that sky blue suits you better than pink?" Li rubbed his ears again. It turned out that Mississippi Lou might not like sky blue. Although Li felt that the new sky blue dress from clothing shop was good, it had been more than a month since he gave it to her, and he had never seen her wear it. The 4 female doctors are all carefully selected, and they are also the most outstanding among all the female doctors. They have a clean background, and each of them has the experience of delivering more than 100 babies, so there won't be any problem in dealing with emergencies, Mingzu said, then looked at him and said, "If you have any other requests, just tell me." Li shook his head and said, "You know Rui. Her body isn't weak, so there shouldn't be any problems. Instead, you should pay more attention to Shizify." Rui and Shizify's birth date was very close, so it was still unknown who gave birth. Li Xian wasn't too worried. He said, "The imperial physician and great master Tan Yin have been invited to the palace by her ladyship. They take qin, Earth's pulse several times a day, so there shouldn't be any problems." Finishing, he looked at Mingzu and asked, Don't you feel the slightest discomfort in your heart?" "Why would I feel discomfort?" Mingzu looked at him and asked in confusion. Li Xian opened his mouth, then waved his hand after a moment. He said, "Forget it, I spoke too much." Li tilted his head and looked at Mingzu. He asked, "How are the matters in court recently?" Rui was doing well and there was nothing for him to worry about. Although there was still some time before she was due to give birth, the family had already made all the necessary preparations. Even the confinement room had been built and all the necessary facilities were available. In the dead of winter, the temperature outside would probably only be slightly above 0 degrees. There was a hot water circulation pipe in the room that had been tested many times and was able to control the room temperature at a suitable temperature. Of course, after Li Xian had seen all the facilities in the house once, he had copied them all. Mingzu nodded and said, "In 2 months, it will be the New Year's Day. The court has been peaceful and there hasn't been anything else." There wasn't anything else to this. Only the 2 of them understood the deeper meaning behind it. Li was a little confused. Although he had only revealed a sentence to Tsing Shichen last time, he had already made his meaning very clear. At this point, there was indeed no need to hide some things. Although this would lead to a greater counterattack from King of Shu's faction, their counterattack had never been small. However, he didn't care. Only when they made a move could he think of countermeasures and eliminate the remaining forces of King of Shu's faction bit by bit. However, it had been nearly 2 months since he last saw Tsing Shichen, and there was no movement from the King of Shu at all. This didn't make sense. Was it because the King of Shu was waiting for his skills to cool down and make a big wave of trouble, or because Tsing Shichen didn't tell them about it at all? The latter was unlikely. After all, the Xing family had been tied to the King of Shu for so many years. If the King of Shu succeeded, he would be a subordinate of the emperor and have a bright future. He wouldn't betray the king at this time, would he? Whether Tsing Shichen had told him or not, there was no way to confirm. 2 months ago, he had been sent by the princess to another province on a business trip as punishment for slacking off and leaving work early. Recently, he had almost run through the provinces adjacent to Jingdo, and it would probably be a few days before he returned. The end of autumn and the beginning of winter in the 3rd year of Jing, he couldn't be more normal. These days, the country was stable, the foreign enemies were temporarily resting, and there was no turmoil in the court. Especially since the Princess Royal Highness took charge of the government, the people lived in peace and praised the many decrees of the court. As a result, everyone almost forgot that during this period of time, standing at the top of the country was a woman. This peace and tranquility lasted until the 15th of November. Because the night before, the first snow fell in the capital. When many people opened their doors in the morning, they found that there was a vast expanse of whiteness in front of them. And also because the night before, in the Marquis Mansion of Chang'an County, the young master of the Leaf family was born. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.